You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, James Payne, and I'm here with my co-host, Dalton Gray.
Hello, how are you doing?
Fantastic. And Mariah Humphreys.
Howdy.
And we are fortunate enough to be here with our featured guest, fellow predator hunter and good buddy, Chris Perez. How you doing today, man?
Good, man.
Good. All right, so we have a couple of topics we're going to hit real quick. We had not a listener question, but a listener comment. Let me get into the email real quick. Which one was this under? So Rick wrote into the show, and I like this for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to talk about it for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
I think it's awesome when people comment into the show, not necessarily with a question, but just an opinion.
Okay.
And doesn't necessarily always have to be one we agree with or anything like that, but it's cool to get that kind of interaction, and it can spark a conversation or it can't. But you know, for anybody listening, if you want to write into the show, you maybe don't have a question per se, but you just want to comment on something that we say. We like reading that too. We won't always talk about every single one, but you know, they're good to read. So Rick writes into the show and he says, "Love the show. Just going to weigh in on the expandable broadheads." This is something we talked about with Brad Ivy a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, episode 19, I think it was.
Yep. He says he's from Illinois, where the only big game is white-tailed deer. We are allowed to use dogs to track wounded deer, and the trackers here hate the expandable broadheads. They say the high majority of their calls are due to those heads, and that also the majority of deer they cannot recover are shot with expandable broadheads. So, and this is something I've heard multiple times.
Yeah.
You know, there's tons of stuff all over the onlines about that. And that's kind of a big reason people stay away from them.
Right.
And I would encourage, if you're looking at hunting with expandable broadheads, definitely go listen to that episode. You said it was episode 19. It was a wealth of information on that stuff, but
yeah. Episode 19, we interviewed Brad Ivy, and he's a big-time bow hunter up here.
Yeah.
And we got into a broadhead discussion about mechanical and expanding broadheads versus fixed blade cut-on contact.
Yeah.
And he subscribes to the expandable broadhead with a light arrow and a fast setup. And that's pretty contrasting to the arrow setups that Mariah and I run.
Yeah.
And we've had good luck with our setups, and he's had good luck with his setups. And I think, well, we were talking about this before we started recording, but I'll mention this again. I look at it similar to like the light caliber match bullet combination that we see in the gun hunting world.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about shooting ethics before, but in a controlled environment, in a situation where you can guarantee a broadside shot, or you know you can put it in the ribs,
right,
at a close distance.
Yep.
It's probably going to work, but it's not advisable.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
As far as the expanding broadheads go in the lightweight arrow, if you hit heavy bone, there is no forgiveness there.
Yeah.
Ribs are one thing, but I mean, if you hit that shoulder bone,
right,
and you, I mean, basically, you're excluding yourself from even being able to take hard quartering away shots. Obviously, no quartering two shots, with expandables, but.
Well, and that was kind of my takeaway, and kind of what I wanted to comment on this is because I've been doing a lot of research into different broadheads and everything. I'm getting a bow set up right now, and you know, it seems like the expandable broadheads just have this attraction to them.
Yeah,
everybody's talking about them. Everybody thinks they're just the coolest thing, and I think a lot of new archers fall into that. Well, and you can probably say that a lot of people are shooting the mechanical broadheads that aren't the style. And that don't have the knowledge that someone like Brad has, and don't do the research into it, and they end up shooting these aluminum ones that have the different rates of, you know, the different cutting widths and everything, and they're maybe you had gone on a pretty expansive rant at one point in one episode about accuracy and making sure that if you're going to go bow hunting, that you practice, make sure you're ethical.
I was just going to comment about that. I do think that, well, I know that a lot of the appeal with mechanical broadheads is that they shoot at targets to the same point of impact as your field points do.
Right.
And like even Brad said, he just tightens the set screw on his mechanical broadhead so that they don't open up the blades. And he never even shoots field points. He just shoots his broadheads.
Right.
But again, Brad is that excessively knowledgeable guy that really takes his time and spends the time on his homework and practices an absolute ton. And the same situation, again, I'll use the comparison. The only guys that I know of that have had good success with shooting game with match bullets with lighter caliber guns are the guys that really, really know their stuff and they know when it's not going to work too.
Right. And they're patient.
Yeah.
They're disciplined.
There's a certain level of expertise that I think you need to be at before you start tinkering with that. For me, I mean, I'm sure Brad is just screaming at his radio right now, just listening to this.
We're not contradicting you, buddy. We're just, just taking a comment.
I mean, to an extent, Brad and I see differently about arrow weights and broadheads.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's just part of being...
I just think
that's just part of being in the circle.
I think my personal, from what I've taken away just on the research I've done, is I think a lot of the hate for expandable broadheads, not saying they don't deserve a certain level of caution, like you're talking about, of know-how before you use them. But I think a lot of it is actually due to negligence and just not understanding the limitations of your setup.
Yeah.
People, if you've got people that are taking shoulder shots at deer, or maybe they're not taking shoulder shots, but they're not good enough shots to not hit the shoulder.
Or they're shooting at 60, 70, 80 yards and they're making bad shots unintentionally.
Right. I think that, to me, that would be probably the higher cause for why there's so many calls on using dogs to track these deer is not because of the broadhead, but because of the shooters of the broadhead.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what was my takeaway.
Absolutely.
Kind of what my research had showed. But.
And I'm not saying that a heavy arrow with a great fixed blade cut on contact broadhead is going to make up for a poor shot. Because if you gut shoot an animal, you gut shoot an animal no matter what you hit it with. It's not going to turn out well.
Right.
So, proficiency with archery goes a long, long ways.
It does.
And practicing it. And Brad mentioned it in that episode 19. Archery is a perishable skill. And if you don't keep up, I mean, I snowblowed in my yard just this last week. And
it's an interesting term for that.
I used the snowblower. How about that? But anyway, it's starting to get warm out here, and it's been up in the man, was it 40 degrees a couple days ago?
It was a little above that, actually.
The snow has been melting, so I was out clearing the snow in the yard to my archery targets, and I've got a lane, and I've been, I've shot my bow, and in preparation for possibly using it on the spring bears, and maybe not. I don't know. I've got some new stuff that we'll talk about here in a second that I might be shooting a gun at a bait this year, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest point I have about it is, you got to stay up on your practice.
Right.
You just have to be proficient.
Yeah, you can't pull your bow out 2 weeks before season opens and expect to be proficient.
No. And if you decide to go with the mechanical broadhead route, then, I mean, you really need to know your stuff.
Right.
Yeah. That's not something just to do just because it's the cool thing to do on the market right now.
Right. So. And if you are, something you wanted to say, Mo?
Yeah,
go for it.
I think a lot of, I remember just as a kid, my dad was up hunting bears with a buddy, and his buddy was shooting expandables. And I remember my dad coming back and talking about how many problems he had with the expandables. I don't know what they were, know what brand or anything like that. I think with a fixed blade broadhead, one of the biggest difference between a fixed blade and an expandable is with a fixed blade, even a dull fixed blade is still going to cut. It's still going to penetrate most of the time. Whereas if you have a poor quality fixed blade, is still a broadhead in that shape, and it's still going to cut, right?
Yeah.
It may not fly great, it may not penetrate or cut great because it may be dull.
Yeah.
But a mechanical has a lot more likelihood to fail. And so if you're shooting cheap or low quality mechanicals, there's a lot more likelihood that the problem is going to be stuff's rattling, stuff gets stuck. Yeah. Some of the originals, you had little rubber bands you put on them that would hold the blades down, right? And you lose that rubber band, and so it opens up in flight and changes everything. And I think there's probably a lot more to do with that and overall. And it comes back to being proficient and knowing what you're shooting.
Right.
And not just buying the first thing that you see when you walk in the store.
Being educated on what you're actually using.
The coolest looking broadhead is probably the expandable.
Right.
But
and that's what I mean. It just has this attraction to it that I think draws in a lot of
expanding
newer
broadheads have the greatest marketing.
They do.
They have all these crazy names, and the picture on the packaging is all these monstrous whitetails or black bears, and I mean it's advertised to be all that in a bag of chips, but it's not.
So
sorry, Brad, but
I'm sure he'll be back and he'll have something to say about it at some point.
I will say, and Dalton said this before the show too, since that conversation, we've both reconsidered some of our thinking on expandables.
Right.
To a point, I don't know if I'll ever shoot them, but I definitely...
Taking a second glance.
Taking a second glance. And when I hear somebody say they shoot mechanicals now, I don't necessarily just write them off as ignorant like I used to.
Yeah.
Which isn't the right attitude to have, but it's hard.
More of an education standpoint.
Right.
Like how much do they actually know about their equipment?
Right.
That comes back to that proficiency statement.
Yeah. So Rick, thank you very much for writing into the show. And again, it wasn't a question, but a comment. And we love getting these. Sometimes we just talk about them, between each other and everything. But sometimes they're pretty interesting and relevant. So we'll definitely bring those up in the show.
Yeah.
And if you are the kind of person that is shooting expandable broadheads and having trouble with not being able to find your deer or anything like that, I would highly recommend you go listen. And let's say this is your first episode. You should go listen to episode 19.
Yeah.
What do we call that? Alaska bow hunting with Brad Ivy?
Yeah, something like
that.
It's
called that. Yeah. So go find that episode. Give that a listen. The guy's an absolute wealth of information. He's a total archery nerd, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And
he's a great guy.
Yeah, and you'll learn a ton. That was a very, very good episode. I enjoyed doing that one.
That was a great show.
But before we get too far, I realized I forgot to tell the listeners what the content of this one was going to be. So we're going to be talking about predator hunting, and that's what Chris here is here to talk about. You are probably the most obsessed predator hunter I've ever met in my life. So I'm very happy you're here. And we have one announcement or actually two announcements, I guess, that Dalton's going to take away. And before we get into that, but just hang in there, people. We're going to be talking all things predator hunting and fur. But before we get to that, Dalton, you want to take that away?
So in our initial stages as a company, we have strived to be associated with the right crowd in this industry.
Yeah. Okay. Very much so.
And I know in the last episode we announced that we were working with Batum 907. And also now we are sponsored through Yukon River Knives. We have a discount code through them where at checkout you can just type in the discount code The Northern Hunter at checkout and get a discount on all their knives. I just got their box of knives in the mail, and they are beautiful. Nothing short of impressive.
Yeah.
They are extremely high quality. The craftsmanship is great. The presentation is great. They all come in their nice little wooden boxes with a certificate of authenticity. That just a great product for, honestly, even without the discount that we get through the show. I mean, I would have no problem paying full price for it. But all of our listeners can get a significant discount.
Yes, very generous discount
on all their knives. That they've been very generous with working with us, and we're excited to help them grow their brand.
Yeah.
And to be honest, just to go off on a little side tangent here, the knife industry is crowded. Okay, there are a lot of great knives out there, and there are a lot of great companies based in America that are making high quality knives for the hunters out there. But these knives come in at some of the models are about half the price of any of your standard household knife company names in the States right now. And these are easily the exact same quality level as any other name brand out there that you can think of.
Yeah.
And they have everything from fleshing knives to everyday, just utility style knives.
Yeah.
I've been carrying the Hunter around on my belt since I got it in the mail a few days ago. I really like that knife.
Yeah.
And the small game. And Mariah and I both got their rifle sling with the little mini ATK knife, which stands for Always There knife. And that fits into the little sheath in the sling. So that in the event that you do forget your main hunting knife and you kill something, you can still gut it and take it apart with that little mini knife.
Right.
It's better than using your broadheads.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I'm sure it is. Well, and I was playing around with that Hunter before we started record that you'd brought in. And I'm amazed at not only the weight, it's a very light knife, but I guess the word would be ergonomic. Style of the handle. It just feels good.
Yes.
Like
it feels
I was
great.
playing with it, doing the different motions and everything.
Fits.
It's very solid and very comfortable knife.
Absolutely. Yes. It's very high quality. So anyway, on that note, Yukon River, I know we mentioned their mission statement. A portion of all their profits goes to support a missionary actually up here in Alaska.
Yeah.
Great company, good Christian folks, like-minded, they're a company of integrity. Right. And another couple of companies that I was really interested in reaching out to that, to be honest with you, I didn't expect any interest. But through a few connections and the help of a few other folks in the industry, those doors were opened. And now the Northern Hunter podcast and our crew here is going to be working with hammer bullets this year.
Yeah.
We're going to be shooting hammers, I think, exclusively.
That's my plan.
That's all of our plans here.
Yeah.
So Hammer Bullets is based out of Kalispell, Montana. USA made, couple of good guys. Steve down there I've been talking to a lot. And just a couple of guys that saw a need in the hunting bullet market. They weren't happy with the selections that were available.
Yeah.
And so they made an all copper bullet with a hollow point that expands rapidly after impact.
Yeah.
Sheds the petals, dumping a lot of energy. And then the shank, which is anywhere from 60 to 80% weight retention, with that flat nose after the petals shear off.
And real quick, that's depending on the model.
Yes.
Because they're designed for either 60 or 80. It's not a variable of you might get one or the other.
Right.
It
is designed to do one thing or the other.
The Hammer Hunter.
Hang on a sec.
Sorry.
Yes. We'll get to that. But after it sheds the petals, the shank will keep penetrating so that you get that traditional value of a monometal with that ultra deep penetration on thick game. But you still get the energy dump and even more than a bonded core lead bullet. The results, and I don't use this word very often, but the results on game are dramatic.
Yeah.
The kills are dramatic.
Yeah.
It works awesome. So I'll let Mariah talk a little bit here. I know he got started here.
I was going to say, just because James mentioned they were different, and there's two primary. They make some other ones.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned them with the concave bullet types when we talked about that a few episodes ago.
I did not.
Okay, so they have those options too.
They have solids.
They have solids that are a concave.
Okay.
Or convex, whichever that is.
Concave, I think.
Concave,
yeah.
Anyway, they have some, and not in all calibers, but in several calibers, they have those available.
Right.
But I believe the Hammer Hunters, they say 60 to 70% expansion, or retained weight, and then it's the shock hammers that are the 80%,
which have now been renamed to the Power Hammer.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Are they updating that across their website? Because I looked the other day and it still said shock hammer.
The ones that I've been looking at that we'll get to here in a second are renamed to Power Hammer.
Okay.
Okay.
At any rate, those ones are a little bit larger hollow point. Those are slightly lower BCs for a little bit more moderate range hunting, but you get a little bit faster expansion.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and that's the thing I love about them, honestly. And a little secret thing. I was actually going to test these bullets this year.
Me too.
Anyways,
yeah,
me too.
I had a full shopping cart full of different ones I was going to buy for my current arsenal.
Yeah,
and we've talked on the show, and people that have listened to the show probably have heard us talk back and forth about bonded and monometals and things like that. And the thing I love about these guys is they fixed both problems.
Yeah.
The people that didn't like lead core because they don't penetrate far enough, well, the hammer penetrates through and through.
Right.
I mean, majority of the time.
Yeah.
And the people that didn't like the monometals, like the Barnes and whatnot, because they had the slower expansion rate and they didn't expand as wide.
Right.
But they penetrated really good.
Yeah.
But they didn't have that energy dump that most of the lead cores do.
Yeah.
Well, the hammers do that too.
Yeah.
It's like they took the
best.
complaints from both sides and they just fixed it. And the thing I really love about these guys is not only their backstory is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But watching them evolve. I've actually been watching Hammer Hunter for some time now.
Yeah.
And because that was the model I was going to buy initially. And watching them interact with the people that use these bullets.
Yeah.
They have like a forum on their webpage that you can go to and then make comments, and they actually interact, and they're commenting and and watching them take comments and take data and just apply that to their designs and alter designs based on the results they're getting.
Right.
And there's so much
troubleshooting
troubleshooting involved, and it's amazing to watch that process.
They have a great connection with their consumers, and they have made dozens and dozens. I mean, as far as options go, they have a plethora of bullet weights in any caliber you would want.
There's like 23 pages worth of options on their site. I think like it's insane.
Yeah, it's very, very, and they develop.
It's
bullets
very customized for different cartridges.
Twist rates.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
And it's all very clearly stated for each bullet and each weight. This is optimally designed for the 308 Winchester or 30-06 or 300 Win Mag.
Yep.
And it says right on there what the recommended twist rate is, minimum twist rate. And then it gives the overall length, and it gives the ballistic coefficient. That they are doing a great job. So we are really excited to be working with Hammer. There'll be more information to come as we get bullets in the mail here shortly and start to reload them and shoot them.
I'm very excited for that.
And then another company that I really wanted to target because of those same values in the industry and the reputation and the name that they have and have had since 1945 is Weatherby Rifles in Sheridan, Wyoming. This was the big fish. And for us to be working with Weatherby is, and I can say this for all three of us, it is an honor.
Absolutely.
100%.
We are honored to be able to be working with them. Adam Weatherby, third generation owner of Weatherby, still in the family, has revamped the rifle lineup of Mark V's, offering now the backcountry. What Weatherby used to be known for was their Monte Carlo stocks and a little bit traditionally heavier style rifle, but offering that blinding speed of a Weatherby cartridge, no matter if it was a 338, 378, or a 6.5 300,
right?
Or the 257 Weatherby. I mean,
the old time
velocities approaching 3,800 feet per second with an 85 grain bullet.
On which one?
The 257.
I don't remember it.
It's way up there.
It's insane.
But anyway,
in true Weatherby fashion.
Yes. So Weatherby has a great name up here in Alaska, and we're excited to be able to recommend those to our listeners.
Right. Yeah.
And so this year, all of us will be shooting Weatherby rifles as well.
Yeah.
So we couldn't be any happier to be partnering with these companies now. Yukon River, Batum 907, Stealthy Hunter with Ryan Lampers, Weatherby, Hammer Bullets, and we have more to come yet.
Right.
That we can't announce just yet. We're still working on some things, but
we
have a lot of exciting things coming, and it's important for us to be in the right crowd in the industry and work with brands that have integrity and that have a good standing in the industry. And, they're just good people, if I can just say it that way. They're just good folks trying to do the right thing. And all of them are heavily concentrated around USA.
Yeah.
And keeping production in the States. All the Mark V's are made right there in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Yep.
And so
America.
We could not be any happier to be working with Weatherby. So again, we'll have more details as we get some rifles and then hand loads for Hammer Bullets. And then incidentally, Weatherby has, I believe, like 15 different loadings in their factory ammo, possibly.
It's not quite 15. I think there's 9 right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
but they're working on it. I know that they're working on getting more cranked out. So
they have quite a few Hammer Bullets loaded into their factory ammunition. So that'll be a great plus as well.
I want to say they've got, of the common ones, it's the 6.5 RPM. They've got the 6.5 6.5 300. Sorry.
Yes.
The 338, 378, 300 Weatherby mag.
Yeah.
There's several other ones that are loaded with Hammer Bullets right now, but certain ones are still lagging behind a little bit. I think they're just working on load development at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
And the guys at Weatherby, I know for a fact that the guy in the ballistics department has a particular liking for Hammer Bullets. He said they just shoot phenomenally well.
I was talking to him the other day. Yeah.
Just easy to get him to shoot well. So
well, and real quickly, 2 things I really like about Weatherby. and that make me really excited for this partnership, is they have mastered the art of providing every version of a hunting rifle that you can possibly want for every version of hunter.
Yeah.
The thing with them is they have their high-end Mark Vs that are sitting around the $4,000 mark.
Yeah.
But in the Mark V lineup, you can also get the Hunter or the Weather Mark that are sub $2,000. They're kicking around $1,400.
Yeah, $1,400 on the shelf.
Brings you down into the Christensen range. So if you can afford a Christensen, you can afford a Mark V.
Yeah.
You just might not be able to get the Carbon AccuMark Pro kind of thing. Then they also have the Vanguard lineup. Now, the Vanguard lineup is a different action. It's a different rifle altogether.
Right.
But those you can get down in the Tikka and Bergara price range.
Yeah.
So if you can afford to spend, only $1,000 on your rifle, you can get into a Weatherby Vanguard and it still holds that Weatherby name.
Yes.
And if you can afford to go $300 or $400 higher than that, you can actually get into the Mark V realm.
Yeah.
And they've just created such a variety of not only rifles but also cartridges.
Yeah.
And they're coming out with more. They keep developing more, like the 338 RPM and the 6.5 RPM and everything. Some of their newer ones on the block, and they're really catering to different styles of hunter. They're not just the big heavy Woodstock Deluxe Mark Vs anymore.
Which there's nothing wrong with that, and I think all three of us have a soft spot deep down in our hearts for a classic walnut stock blue gun. It just looks nice, but we like to beat our stuff up here in Alaska. And I actually right now I have a 338 RPM in the backcountry line. It should be on the way. That I'm really excited to shoot this year, and I've got some hammer bullets coming for it that I'm going to reload get a hand load worked up for it. And I couldn't be any more excited to get that rifle in the field. That 338 RPM with an 18-inch barrel with a break, without a scope and without ammo, and it only weighs 5.4 pounds. So you're getting a 338 caliber rifle in a short, compact guide rifle style rifle that's lightweight. Finally, a lightweight guide rifle that has plenty of poop to put down a grizzly bear. So I'm really excited about that.
And the last thing I like about, or not the last thing I like, I shouldn't say that, but the second thing I was going to mention is Roy Weatherby was a Kansas boy.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I have that little home state pride there, and being a gun nut from Kansas myself. So. But so what do you think, Mo?
Well, I was going to say was I know James and I specifically, and Dalton, you were at times too. I was going to buy a Weatherby rifle this summer. It wasn't. It's not just because we're partnering with them. Suddenly, we're Weatherby people.
If I'm not mistaken, all three of us were going to purchase one here this spring and start shooting it this year exclusively anyway. So this just happens to work out.
Right. And I just wanted to say that, like in the same, like James said for Hammer, and with a lot of these companies we're working with, it's not just that, with the case of Beta 907, we've used their products for years. But with Hammer and with Weatherby, it's not that we're just talking about them now because we're partnering with them and we've got great deals and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's because we wanted them and we wanted to partner with them specifically because of the great products and the great companies that they are.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I like about all of the partnerships we've gotten so far. Is they all, like Dalton says, align with our values, align with the just the direction we're heading. And it's really an awesome ride. So
at the end of the day,
we're very happy with it.
At the end of the day, everybody that we're going to be working with, no matter who it is, we will not work with a company that doesn't make products that are great for Alaska hunting.
Right.
That's our focus here. And that's what we're going to continue to focus on.
And a lot of that's just the trust itself too. We don't want to, just like with the articles we talked about, not trying to be clickbaity and all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just the direction we're going. So we're trying to be if we don't trust it, we won't talk about it kind of thing.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And you can hold us to that as long as we're around. So But so I think we've talked about that enough, and I think we've pretty much hammered.
All right, folks, I want to take a second to tell you about a product I found this last year and have absolutely fallen in love with. It's the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. I used one on a recent black-tailed deer hunt in southeast Alaska, and it did a great job of keeping the saltwater and debris out of the action and also protecting the scope on my rifle from getting knocked around and damaged. On top of all that, the carry handle made it easy to transport the rifle to and from the boat during the hunt. When it got wet from rain and ocean spray, I hung it up at camp to dry at night, and it was always dry in 20 minutes or less. Stealthy Hunter also offers a wide variety of nutritional supplements for the outdoorsman, such as CBD oils, essential vitamins, turmeric, and bone broth. In the gear shop, they also have a lightweight first aid kit, glassing pads, and stuff sacks to organize your gear and your pack. Go check out Stealthy Hunter's website and use the code TheNorthernHunter at checkout to get a discount on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
That out. Mr. Chris.
Yes, sir.
Time to step up to the microphone, sir. How you doing?
No pressure, huh?
Yeah. None at all, man. None at all. So
you're a predator hunting machine.
That's a broad title there.
Hey,
hey,
Chris.
I like it.
Let's get in on that mic.
Oh,
Nice and
absolutely.
keep it, yeah. Do you hear that? Yeah.
there you go.
You can hear yourself nice and close. That's good.
Yep.
So go ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, how you got to Alaska, all that.
Well, I'm originally from Big Bear Lake, California.
Okay.
Up in the San Bernardino Mountains.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so I don't really have any hunting background, but I fished growing up.
Okay.
And camped out, and it's pretty high altitude, a lot of snow, and
Mm-hmm.
a little more snow than here. Not as cold, but
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
but so that's kind of the fishing thing's always been my thing, and
Yeah.
never really had any exposure to hunting or didn't grow up around firearms, anything like that. But,
Right.
But
How close is that to Santa Cruz?
Santa Cruz, I should know this. I'm gonna say, good thing there's lots of traffic. I'm gonna go with maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know.
Only reason I ask is my.
Why don't here? Let me pull the old anti-nonsense device out here.
We don't got to get that technical with it. I was just gonna say because my wife went to college in Santa Cruz.
Oh, cool.
And so she keeps telling me about the northern part of California and how it's mountains and beautiful and
It
gorgeous
really
and
is.
everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like the desert in the south and everything.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of different terrain in a
mhm.
short distance. You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you can snow ski.
Yeah.
Go to the beach, go to the desert.
Yeah.
All in the same day. It's
Yeah.
everything's in pretty close proximity.
lots of different ecosystems down there.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So what brought you up here?
Just adventure, really.
Right.
I had a neighbor that lived in 2008. I had a neighbor that lived next to me that was from here, and I started picking his brain a little bit and watching some Alaska shows, and
Nice.
so I'm like, all right, I want to go do something a little bigger, and I definitely found it.
Yeah. That's for sure, man. That's for
So you
sure.
moved up to Alaska in what year?
July of 2008.
Okay.
Okay.
2008.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so at what point did you get into hunting up here? Was it pretty much right away or was it a couple year process?
No, it was a little later on. I came up and I thought I was going to do a lot of my normal fishing theme, but
Mhm.
fishing's a lot different here, and
Mhm.
down there's a lot of rod and reel, a lot of largemouth fishing,
Yeah,
right.
cat fishing,
Yeah.
and so there's you don't really have that here. So I learned pretty quick. I had some neighbors that trapped, and once I realized the fishing wasn't the same gig that I was used to, these guys are like, "Well, hey, have you ever trapped?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't have any interest in that." And so I tried to do the ice fishing thing a little bit, and ran with that, and that can be pretty intimidating and tough. That takes a while to kind of get into, and
Yeah.
I managed to get into that a little later, but and then spring rolled around, and those guys, they're, well, you going bear baiting? And oh no, I don't bear bait, and they're just looking at me like, man, this guy really is from California. But
oh boy.
But you acclimated, right?
well, so once I realized I wasn't, I was going to have a long winters and stuff, I kind of started digging around a little more and
Yeah.
taking these guys up on their offers and stuff, and
Right.
going out and learning. So
yeah, that's the best way.
It was definitely quite the adjustment from what I came from.
Yeah.
So what did you start out hunting once you got into it up here?
I had a couple buddies take me out caribou hunting, and I did some spot and stalk bear stuff.
Nice.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much about the extent of that early on.
Yeah. What would you, at what point did you like start heading out on your own? I mean, they really kind of caught the bug, I guess.
I think kind of like we all do. I didn't really have a guide.
Right.
So I kind of went out on my own and, a lot of failed attempts, and tried to tag along a lot and pick up off, pick other guys' brains on how it's done. And so
it's the best way to learn.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And so, where are we going here?
Just getting into hunting and just how you started.
Yeah, and I kind of just started tagging along with, on moose trips and stuff like that. And of course, when you're the guest, you don't get to shoot the first time.
Right.
Right. Or the second. Yeah.
Or the yes.
And you're the pack boy.
Yeah. A lot of work. Yeah.
So did you get to take part in some other folks getting some animals and get to be a part of that processing side of things and just kind of get your boots bloody that way?
Yeah, I did. I got to go on a lot of hunts and
okay.
Yeah, I got invited a lot, and once I realized that it was a little different here, I started taking all those opportunities and capitalizing on it. So
Well, I gotta say that there's definitely a time that you figured it out, because I think. So you and I were actually talking about this earlier. I think we've known each other 3 years now, something like that. Two or 3 years.
I want to say maybe even a little more, maybe the 3.5 year mark. But
and I know that we've talked extensively about different hunting trips and everything like that. And you have a knack for finding things that I've noticed.
Okay.
and that's one thing I love. Honestly, I like picking your brain too, because I know you talk about caribou hunting a lot and everything like that.
Yeah, we love caribou hunting.
Yeah. What would you say if you had to, like, what's your, aside from predator, like, what's your favorite hunt you'd say you've done up here?
I'd have to say black bear hunting.
Black bear, yeah.
There's a lot of crossover between predator hunting and black bear hunting, in my opinion.
Big predators.
Yeah, it's, a fox won't eat you, but a bear might,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Need a slightly bigger gun.
Yeah.
So when you say black bear hunting, is that spot and stalk or over a bait?
I like to do a little spot and stalk before green out,
Yep.
And also what I'll usually do, because baiting's not very productive early on. So you got that slow phase, that startup. So what I'll do is I'll get, my baits established for the season, and then I'll go do, some spot and stalk to take the time up. And
And so give me a 50,000 foot view of what that looks like. So you pick a spot where the snow's starting to melt. You got some south facing slopes. You go in there and tent camp for a few days, or you just riding in places and just kind of looking for activity, or how does a hunt like that get formed in your process?
I've lucked out in finding bears where they wouldn't seem to be. Yeah, and so
brushy areas or above brush line or what?
Brushy areas above brush line. Small clearings. And I know a lot of guys like to hunt that really dense stuff, set up on that super dense stuff, and that was another thing I kind of learned on my own. I didn't really have a lot of guidance. In fact, I picked your brain at one point, Dalton, on a job we were on, and that's kind of what I do. I've kind of just I'm always, writing notes and trying to learn, but so usually I'll shoe in to claim my spot. I'll snowshoe in, and then I might haul a little bit in by pack. I have a 4-wheeler, but I've never set a bait with a 4-wheeler. I've always walked in. I just because I feel like you kind of set the stage for
competition.
Yeah, that's very true.
I do the same thing. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I do the same thing.
So a lot of my stuff is walk in. I'll pack everything in, or I'll try to summons a buddy that doesn't know any better to kind of help me. But
that was
come see how fun this is.
It doesn't take long before you're up there alone.
All of your packing buddies are like 6'5" and 225 and just big muscular fellas, and then about halfway in with a 100-pound pack, they're crying.
Yeah, I mean, they do pretty good.
Not that I have any personal experience with that.
Yeah, well, we all love bear baiting here as well.
Yeah.
I am on the edge of my seat for that to kick off.
I love hike and baiting, and
Yeah, me too.
And it's a good chance to scout other stuff for potential calling, in the winter, and it's just a good way to get out. It's
So then let's talk about predator calling first, then we'll circle back around to bear baiting here in a little bit.
Sure.
I think that's first on our list here. So what got you into predator calling up here? And just for folks, talk about what predator calling is, what animals that includes, and just talk about how you got into that.
I think that, I kind of started trying, I gave a go at trapping and I didn't really, it just wasn't interactive enough, and that's nothing on, and I got tons of buddies that trap, and I think it's cool, and it's hard work, and I think in some cases it's harder work than predator calling, but
it's a lot of time.
I just think calling's a lot more interactive.
Yeah.
And I'm into exploring, and I love that element of it. And I like the difficulty of it. I like that the success rates aren't all that great. And so it's very rewarding. It gives you a chance to kind of key in on animal behavior, and study different things a little bit. And that's actually a lot of how I learned to track and different things is call something in, shoot it, go and look at where it came from, what it did.
Right.
I mean, I've spent more time doing that, walking back in where something came into a call and, kind of saw where it milled around, or maybe it got a case of the ADD and I wasn't doing something right, and kind of, but
yeah. What was your first predator hunt? I'm sure it's a huge memory bank.
I actually remember it. So I remember when I got really geared up, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. And I was pretty busy with work, and I go, okay, I don't know what day it was, but I picked a day, and I go, okay, I got the day off. And so that was the only day I had off, and I wake up and it's 47 below, and
oh my, it's a little bit chilly,
and I hadn't really learned to dress yet, and I had these big. A buddy of mine gave me these big blue Carhartt coveralls. They were insulated, and I think I had like a mossy oak beanie on. Just everything you don't really do. I mean, but and so I went out and sat a couple spots that I had looked at, and I ended up calling a lynx in first go. And I'm like, oh, this is easy. And I went up to another spot and called a fox in. And I'm like, oh man, it's going to be like this all the time. Like I can get into this. And was that about where it stopped? There was definitely a lull there for a while after that.
I mean, 47 below, that's dedication right there.
Well, and it's so different when you're sitting too.
Yeah.
Like when you're out snowshoeing around and stuff like that, and you're kind of building the body heat. But when you're sitting for a 45-minute, 30-minute set, it gets cold quick.
Yeah. So then what animals do you generally target? When we say predators, tell folks what animals those are.
Anything that's dumb enough to come to me blowing a predator call, if it, I mean, what I like about Alaska is there's so many species that I mean, you really never know. You have your expectations, but you really never know what's going to show up on stand. Right. And I think that's awesome. That's part of the, what's so intriguing about it and exciting.
Yeah. And so Alaska has foxes, and we have coyotes,
lynx,
and we got lynx,
wolves, Wolverine.
Yeah, wolverines. Yeah.
Have you ever called in a wolverine?
I have not, but I've talked to some guys that have guided me along the way that claim to have. So and I think they can be pretty receptive to call.
I would imagine so. Yeah, they might just romp right in there like nothing's in their way.
Yeah, it
you
sounds
ever called
scary,
in an ermine?
No.
Well, he may not know. They're white, so
right. Just pops his head in, disappears.
Yeah. What about a marten?
So I actually had a situation last winter. I sat down on a pond and I started calling, and it wasn't really the weather wasn't optimal. It really wasn't. It wasn't a very good day in my opinion. And I got the call set out about 200 yards. And so I start calling away and I see this little red thing running around and I go, oh, red squirrels. He's interested. That'll work, And so I sit there and he takes off in the woods and I see him again kind of milling around and he comes back out and I start getting a better eye on it and I'm like, man, that's a really big red squirrel there. And so it ended up being a marten and I have the 17 WSM, and I'm like, I don't know, man. And I got a front on shot with a rear exit and
wow, okay.
Yeah, so and it wasn't a real big marten, and it wasn't super prime, but it's getting mounted. So because of the situation,
I don't know many guys that have called in marten. So
yeah, I'd actually never heard of that before.
Yeah,
so.
It was a first for me, and
Yeah.
I've talked to guys, I've heard of it, but that was a first for me, and
yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I took him to my taxidermist and I said, hey man, can you mount this thing up? And he's like, well, you kind of blew the back end out, And I said, can you put him in a sitting position or something? He goes, yeah, well, why do you want this thing? And I said, well, I called it in. And he's, get out of here, man. It's, yeah, I know. So.
That's pretty special right there.
So did you know you were addicted to this like immediately, or did it take some trial and error? And
I think I knew I was hooked pretty early on. Yeah. I think the first time I went out, I was definitely hooked. And when you have a first day like that, and that's definitely not how it went. That wasn't the standard. Right. I mean, there was a lot of trial and error. So,
well, and the one thing I like about talking to you throughout the winters and everything like that is you're always going after something. It's, oh man, I'm heading over this way. Oh man, I'm going over this way. So how'd your year go? Overall, give us a kind of a recap of 2022, 2023, because this episode's airing end of March,
April,
early April.
Yeah, I think it's airing in April. Yeah.
So seasons are pretty much closed at this point. That's kind of we're doing an end of predator season kind of thing here.
Coyotes are still open. Wolves are still open. Everything's else, everything else is pretty much closed.
Fox, lynx,
and then once you start getting that freeze thaw, that's kind of you get about a week window, and then you really start you start looking at they're about to blow coat. So you can still pick up some nice coyotes and wolves this time of year, but it starts getting pretty dicey once you start getting this good weather like this. So
yeah, for sure.
So did you do pretty good earlier in this winter?
I didn't cull as much as I wanted to, but I did pretty good considering. I mean, I was pretty satisfied. I mean,
yeah. So give us some rough numbers.
Well, we got couple cats. There's a few of us that go out. So, I mean, we did pretty good on the cats. We found some pockets, and then early season, we'll try to target coyotes before the snow's too deep and they're having a hard time getting around.
Yeah.
And they kind of start hanging towards the bottoms and the river bottoms and stuff, or wind blowing stuff. So,
right.
How about fox? Did you get a lot of fox this year?
Yeah, it was a good fox year. I found some fox, and I kind of sent a buddy of mine that's new to predator calling. I kind of helped him out a little bit. And I'd be like, hey man, I saw a fox over here. I saw a pair over here once they started pairing up,
Yeah.
So, but there was definitely a lot of fox this year.
And what time of year do you see those fox start pairing up together?
It's weird. From my experience, it's usually mid-January. And I know there's a lot of schools of thought on that, but I saw them paired up around December 1st this year, and I don't know if that's a weather thing. I don't know what kind of gets them going like that, but
we did have earlier cold this winter.
Yeah, we did. We had some earlier cold set in November, and then it leveled out and got pretty nice for the rest of it, honestly.
Right. It's been a weird one.
We didn't really have any extended 20, 30 below for weeks and weeks on end this winter at all, honestly.
It's the warmest winter I've experienced since I've been here.
This has been a really, really mild year. Yeah. And we haven't gotten but 100 inches of snow, I think, total.
Yeah. I mean, especially compared to last year.
And that was out at ski land, so that's probably more than town.
Yep.
But
and even when it did drop down into those super negative temps, it was just for a couple days. 4 days here, maybe.
Right.
I think we had one solid week where it was negative 40, and that was it.
I think that was the week before Christmas.
It was.
Yeah. It was right as we got back.
Because I actually had some cold day cutoffs at work because of that. Just we didn't want to be driving the work van around and risk breaking something.
Sure.
And, it gets dangerous like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, so then walk us through kind of your setup. Do you use a mouth call? How long do you sit for? Are you calling nonstop? I know that's a lot of questions, but just so I guess here's the first one. How long do you sit and call for at any given stand?
So if I can tolerate it, I mean, I'll sit an hour. If I'm going after cats,
Okay.
I think the longer you're willing to sit, the better. I mean, and if you kind of reference that to like a house cat, they're very distracted.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been able to watch one coming to call at a distance, you pick up on that. It's a lot of, I switch through sounds a lot.
And you use an electronic caller.
Electronic call primarily with cats. Because it just takes that focus off you.
Do you use a Fox Pro?
I do.
Do you use the 24C?
No, that's a good one though.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
Yeah, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah,
I think I have the it might be the C2S. It's the model right under that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
what did
the clarity on that one's really good that you got. That's I think that's 24-bit sound.
Yeah.
So
it's a very, very good sounding
and that's
caller.
another thing that's debatable with guys is if sound clarity matters. Yeah.
Did you start off with electronic calls or did you start off mouth calling?
I started off with both. But the electronic call, I think the numbers, you don't have the numbers like you have down south. And I really kind of got the mindset, I'm going to call everything in with a hand call. And that's just not practical when you're starting out. So,
so when an animal comes into a call, for the folks that aren't familiar with predator calling, you're calling them in with sound, obviously. And when they get out into an opening, if you're calling like over a frozen pond or like on a river, they're coming to that sound.
Sure.
And there is inherent motion that goes into mouth calling.
Yes,
you have one hand up to your mouth and you're oftentimes moving that hand and trying to manipulate that caller and make it sound as realistic as possible. And most of the time, you're pretty much out of breath when you're wailing away on that mouth call.
Yeah.
But if they come out, and especially a lynx, if it gets a pin on you and sees you moving, you might not even see that cat. He might just sit in the willows and just post up and not even come in.
Yeah, and that's a big one too. They'll observe from afar. I think a lot of people think they just roll in, and they don't. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've got up to call it, and that's another big one is when you get up, don't just leave and don't start chattering.
Right.
Because I can't tell you how many times I've got up and looked across a pond or out in a clearing, even walking back to the truck. If I'm calling, leaving the truck from the road, coming back up, I've had cats sitting on the other side of the road.
Oh boy.
That stalled up between me calling and coming back to leave. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to look for. And that movement, I agree with that big time. I mean, that'll bust you.
And so then getting that caller out there away from you. I know you mentioned that at some points you'll put a caller out 100 or more yards in front of you to get that sound away from you so that when they come in, they're not coming right at you, so that you have a little bit of forgiveness to move and get your rifle into shooting position.
Right. Yep.
Just something. And then how often do you use a decoy too?
So I've kind of grown out of the decoy a little bit.
Really?
I like to use that decoy for cats because it's just that little extra.
Can kind of coax them out of that brush.
Perk their interest.
With canines, now what I'm kind of getting into, I had an old timer kind of school me up a little bit. And what I'm kind of doing now is I'm stashing that e-collar and making them look for it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like, and this is just kind of my thought, and I know some guys might disagree with this, but I feel like canines are kind of more apt to look from afar and ID and go, nah, this ain't right. I'm out of here. There's something about this that's, and you never get a chance. So the one thing I like to do when I'm trying for canines is I like to stash that call and make them look for it a little more.
Yeah, it kind of makes it seem a little bit more natural.
And I used to throw the call out in the open, and I try not to do that. If there's something I can stash it in, I mean, because they're slick.
Are you talking just like some brush or something like that?
Yeah, anything you can. Yeah.
Which realistically, I mean, a wounded animal, that's what they would run to. something like that.
Yeah.
They're not going to be sitting out in the middle of a wide open
Yeah,
field.
they're not going to lay out where they're vulnerable. And
right.
you got more to worry about than just, four-legged critters. You got, birds and
hawks and owls.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I guess we hadn't mentioned, but the sounds we're talking about calling predators in with, if you're from a part of the country that's not a thing, and maybe you haven't looked into that, are animal distress calls. Yeah. So what you have is either a mouth call or a electronic call where they've programmed in these sounds of rabbits and all kinds of different small critters, and sometimes even the bigger ones. I know my Fox Pro has like the moose calf in distress and deer in distress and things like that. But for predators, like if you're trying to call in coyotes and fox and lynx and things like that, typically you're going to be sticking with the smaller animals. And so it's just a very high pitch distress sound. It's the sound that an animal would make if it was wounded or
caught by another predator.
Yeah. And so that perks these predators' interest and kind of gets them to come in.
Yeah.
And kind of to circle back to the tactic thing a little bit. So I've heard two main theories that most people argue about when they're talking about this. And one is that they want the call right on them. If they're using an electronic call, to bring that way the animals expose themselves kind of centered to you, and it makes them easier to see and to see their movement. But as you guys pointed out, that also puts the focus on you.
Yeah.
And the other option is, like you had said, to put it several yards out in front of you, several hundred yards even sometimes. But
I think 50 is the sweet spot. 50 to 100 is a sweet spot.
Yeah. That's about where I put it.
Yeah.
So if I'm in tight cover, I'll do that. I'll put that call right up on me, maybe 10 yards off my feet. Especially if I'm going for cats and I don't have a lot of open space.
Yeah.
Cause that's all you're going to get,
Right.
And sometimes you can't really pick your spots. So you just got to do it. If you cut a fresh track or something and you want to go for it, it's not always going to be in an ideal setting. So you got to work with what you got. But
right. So it's kind of just a situational thing for you then, as far as where you.
And the other thing is there's something else when you're working with big open country. This is another thing I've kind of gotten away from, is walking that call right out there in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And so you're doing a couple things. And I mean, this is just my theory. You're spreading scent if you're going after canines.
Right.
Which doesn't always matter. I mean, sometimes they'll throw caution to the wind. I've lucked out learning, and I mean, it nailed them anyway. But I like to avoid making a big scene when I go into certain spots that are open. And I mean, a lot of the time they'll be just bedded up out of the way where they still have a good ocular advantage, So I don't like to, set that call way out there and walk out, disperse a bunch of scent.
Yeah.
But anyway,
when you started early on with electronic caller, did you ever use anything for a speaker besides a Fox Pro or a dedicated electric collar?
I no, I'm not old school enough for that.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
I know a lot of guys that talk about that.
Okay, so
go ahead and tell that story.
I haven't personally killed anything predator calling. I haven't spent a lot of time doing it, but I've been on several kills just because the animal ran into his line of sight and not mine, depending on the situation. But one of those was, and this is what, and Dalton and I have even done this when we were teenagers. I had a DeWalt speaker. It had great sound clarity.
Yeah. I think I heard about this on one of your previous episodes.
I may have mentioned it, but it's plenty loud. Bluetooth. You can get some of those sounds on your phone, and as long as you don't have a phone that dies and a good battery, it works great.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys, use a lot of different things. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think that's another fun thing about it is you can kind of, you can do your own thing, and it's put your own spin on it, and you're not doing it wrong. You ain't going to lose.
There's even guys in the Midwest that I mean, as I was a teenager, when we came back to the States, I was really trying to get into predator calling a lot. And so I was watching a lot of these, what's his name? Randy
Anderson?
Randy Anderson. Yeah. Calling all coyotes.
Old legend.
And that guy puts up for, like it's the 1600s.
You almost wonder if they got like these things corralled somewhere or something.
He kills.
High fence predator hunting.
He kills.
You're like the old bass fishing videos.
Yeah.
Got them all netted up.
Yep. But I remember watching some of these old DVDs and whatnot, just trying to educate myself for how to do it. But a lot of it was the Midwest, and a lot of that is surprisingly different tactics than up here.
Yes.
And you touched on this earlier, but the density of predators compared to like the open prairie of the Midwest, where you might call in a half dozen coyotes at one set.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes one pair comes in, you shoot them both. And this is one of Randy's videos. He shot 2, and then he kept the caller going, changed it to coyote distress after he made the gunshot noise. 2 more coyotes came in right in the same spot right behind him, killed them both. And then he kept it rolling, and 2 more came in. He shot 6 at one set.
It's like you could sit there all day with a lunch pail.
Yeah.
Oh, and you could.
Yeah. And you could just shoot 20 of them in a day.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from growing up in farm country in Kansas, there's no shortage of them.
It seems like it's just an endless number of coyotes.
It's every day you're rolling down the road, and if you're looking, you'll see them. They're just always
That's
there.
how it is back home.
and
I mean, they're
people-
just everywhere.
I think a lot of people, and this really applies for any game animal in Alaska. Alaska is what, 2.5 times the size of Texas? Something crazy like that?
Something like that.
They're always kind of seem to be reestablishing it.
If you split Alaska in half, Texas would be the 3rd largest state.
That's right.
Right. So Alaska's so big, it's so unsettled, relatively speaking, for the land size that we have. And people think that there's just an animal behind every tree.
Yeah, they sure do.
And the density is not that at all. And in some cases, I mean, if you fly up into the Brooks Range, sure, the caribou migrate through there, and they'll be there for a couple weeks out of the year on their way through. And one day you might see 2,000 caribou in a day. But then for the rest of the year, it's just transient animals that just move through that area. And there's really nothing that ever stays there.
It kind of seems to be Alaska overall.
Yeah.
Fishing, hunting, you know.
Yeah. Everything moves, and it's all centered around the weather.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the density of predator calling in Alaska, and like you mentioned, it's overall, it's a pretty low success rate.
It really is.
I only made it out twice this year. Mariah and I went for a drive and for a couple of days and made a bunch of sets and didn't call anything in. We had pretty good conditions. I have been taught from I have some folks that I'm pretty tight to that have had a lot of success predator calling, and the advice that I've gotten from them is a little bit shorter sets, like that 15 to 20 minute range, and I've had really mixed success with that. I've been with one of these guys that I'm talking about and killed a couple of things with that individual on 20-minute sets, calling out cats with a decoy.
Yeah.
But I have been wondering, even this year after Mo and I went out that one time, I got back from that trip and I was texting that fella and I said, man, I wonder if I shouldn't start making longer sets. Like it doesn't seem like in this much expansive terrain and with as loud as that caller is, if there's something listening to this a mile away and he takes his time, it might take him a half hour just to get there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So that's something that I'm going to be reevaluating, and with all of our developments, and you know, we mentioned getting rifles in and having to hand load some hammer bullets. My time is pretty much expired for predator calling this year. I had considered running out here this upcoming weekend to make a few sets here just outside of town, but I really don't think I'm going to have time. But something for next year just to think about, and as this season wraps up, it's always good to criticize your own tactics. And that's how you learn, right? You have to shoot holes in what you're doing in order to figure out how to improve. And so I think for me, the number one thing that I'm going to do differently is just make longer sets, because I pay attention to wind. You know, you wear the right over whites and you sit with some backdrop. You don't silhouette yourself. You play the wind. You sit. I mean, talk about sitting still. I mean, how many times have you been busted moving versus not? I mean,
and that's a huge one.
And so talk about how you sit or stand. Do you prefer standing back in the trees a bit with like a tripod setup, or do you sit with a backdrop?
What I've really gotten into, I've tried all kinds of stabilizing methods for the rifle, and what I really like that I'm using now is it's a Swagger and it's a QD 42. and it extends all the way out. I don't know what the smallish measurement is, but it compacts down pretty good. You can throw it in a bag. It doesn't stay connected to the rifle.
Okay.
And it's always sitting.
So it's a little bipod or a tripod?
It's a bipod.
Okay.
And it's they're awesome.
Does it have a swivel head on it?
It's
that turns with the gun or no?
Is that the one you were showing me earlier this year that you can rest on your...
Yeah, yep. And you can use it in a standing position. They're actually great for they're great for all kinds of hunting. I mean, in my opinion. I mean, but sitting for sure. You're going to be able to stay still and I mean, that's my take. And lots of guys do it differently.
I really like those swaggers because some of their models are kind of too bulky, I think. I don't think I'd want to go with those models, but
there's like that older model that's got that big old configuration.
Yeah, it goes all the way down the stock.
I know what you're talking about.
But the one you have is real slick. I like that.
Yeah, that's real refined, and it's got like a QD disconnect, so you can take that thing off and throw it in your backpack, and it's not on the rifle the whole time.
Talk about the standing method of using that, because that fascinated me when you were showing me that.
It's kind of, I don't really know how to describe it.
Well, I can do my best, but.
Yeah, how would you describe that? So I guess if you were walking into a stand and you had tall brush and you needed to take a standing shot and you needed to stabilize and you didn't have something like a tree or, something to stabilize on, you can actually hook that bipod up and bury that thing, extend it about halfway and bury it about into your waist on your belt.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how stable
it comes out at like a 45-degree angle.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's actually a really dynamite idea.
And that was one thing.
I like that a lot about it.
Yeah, that was one thing that really caught my eye. Was it's not like most bipods where they're kind of stuck in their position unless you use you push the pins in and move it into certain slots. It's it's basically on a spring.
Yeah.
And you can just really quickly adjust however you need to for whatever situation you're in, and it goes forwards, backwards, sideways. Your pan and your pivot.
I like that it articulates back like that too.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty handy.
And I think the range on that's like 270 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really you can twist that thing up pretty good.
That's pretty good.
And another thing I like about that is, some of these other ones I've used, they get stuck in the snow. You get out of the truck, you go on a walk, they're warm. And there's a bunch of schools of thought on that too. Leave your gear in the back of the truck or outside, whatever. But I like that swagger. You can pinch that thing together and basically, I don't know what you would call that. It's basically turn it into a single leg
monopod.
Like a monopod, and you can pivot more,
almost just like a shooting stick.
And you can pick it up and kind of rearrange it on the fly, and it doesn't hinge you up too much.
That's pretty handy.
Yeah.
So then, when you're sitting at a stand in any given set per se, you're trying to sit with the rifle in a shooting position to have minimal movement when an animal steps out.
So that's another thing about that bipod is you can kind of shoulder that.
Yeah.
So when you sit down, set up, get settled in, you can kind of start looking at your angles, looking at kind of evaluating your kill box, and see, okay, this is probably where something's going to come in if it comes in. So you set up based off that. And then you just kind of shoulder that. And I like that too, because like starting out, I'd lay the rifle across my lap. I'd try to hold it. Your hands get cold.
Yeah.
It's, you're always contending with something weather related, and that all translates to sitting still.
Yeah.
And then once you have that shouldered, it's just half the motion you need to make to take a shot. So
yeah. No, that's awesome.
I really like that.
That's how I was taught as well. I mean, I haven't used a bipod a whole lot. The last time I used a bipod, I had a fox run in about 10 yards in front of me coming across at about Mach 7.
Yep.
And I couldn't move it fast enough, and it was stuck in the snowpack, and I picked the gun up and I didn't even get a shot at it. My brother took a couple of shots and missed it. I mean, it was, like I said, he came in at full speed.
That's what they do too.
Saw us at like 10 yards away off to his left, and then immediately just in full speed, just changed directions and was just going off across the clearing. And then my brother lit off a couple of rounds and didn't hit it. But I mean, I swear he was dodging the bullets. I mean, he would go back one way and then the other way, and like he knew he was getting shot.
Oh yeah.
And but anyway, so since then I haven't used a bipod again, but I follow the same school of thought though. When I sit, you got your little. I use the Stealthy Hunter glassing pad.
Yep.
That we that we all use. And I did just sitting there on your rear end in the snow. You kind of kick out a little spot to sit. You're kind of recessed down a little bit. That's some cover for the bottom half of you when you're sitting there. And then I just have my knees propped up, and I just rest the rifle on one or the other knee. And then same thing. I have the stock on my shoulder, and it sits there well enough so that if something pops out, I can just reach up my right hand. I'm usually trying to push the button with my right hand, and then if something pops out, I just reach that hand up and grab the gun and just manipulate and shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. As little of motion as possible, because most people don't realize, and like we mentioned earlier, they're coming in to eat.
Right.
They're looking intently for whatever is making that noise.
Yep.
And as soon as you move, they're going to key in on you like, is that the rabbit?
Well, and
then they realize you're not a rabbit, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And that happens in 2 seconds or less.
And people forget, that's how they make their living.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the other side of that too is, you sit down, you hunker down, and you're right at eye level for most critters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you sit down and you think you're hiding, and you just put yourself there in front of everybody. So
it puts you in their dimension.
Yeah. So what would you say was like your early lessons that you were learning with this? Like what's the common mistakes that like you had to learn to correct? That would be, let's just say your toughest one. If there is one.
I think gear maintenance is a huge one.
Yeah.
Yep. So I know you guys all know this. Cold is the killer of electronics. It's the killer of equipment.
No.
Everything gets sticky. Everything malfunctions. Light primer strikes. That's a huge one. And I'll sacrifice a rifle and strip all that oil out.
Oh, absolutely.
And run it dry. And then there's guys out there that'll be like, no way. And and I'll give it some TLC in the spring, but I run everything pretty dry. I've had a lot of light primer strikes.
Yeah.
Not keeping stuff real oiled up. That's a huge one. Even with good lube, I don't think they make anything that contends with these elements at all.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're sitting out there at -40, I mean, it doesn't matter. They make cold weather gun lubricant, but it's even that stuff, man. I've had that stuff come up on me too.
I've tried all kinds of stuff, and it's just like a debris attractant, know?
Yeah, that's really the big part.
Every bit of dust and anything that kicks up. Yeah, it's not good. I do the same thing. I run every gun I own dry. I don't run anything oiled for any time of year for any purposes.
Any kind of lubricant?
Really? Nothing.
That you're the first guy I've met.
I do not like running any lubricant on anything. Now, my maintenance routine, if I'm storing something, it gets oiled up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as soon as I go out on a hunt, and I've been doing this for years now, every rifle I take out, I am paranoid, like you mentioned about light primer strikes, where you get that firing pin spring that'll get a little bit of grease on it or a little bit of oil, and it just is a magnet for dirt and dust.
It is.
And your rifle does get dirty. That is inevitable. And going through the brush and getting dirty, it seems like all those little particles of pine needles or whatever it is somehow makes its way into your bolt assembly, and it just ends up dusty and dirty over time.
Yeah.
And so before every hunt, I just take a paper towel and I just wipe it off. Now it still has some residue on there.
You don't degrease it.
No, I don't degrease it, but I just take off what's on the surface.
I don't want people to get the wrong idea that because if he degreased it, his bolt wouldn't function right.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is I do a similar thing. I just put a light coating on it.
What I do
is I make sure any kind of excess is off there because You're right. You don't want any kind of
everything.
Yeah, because essentially it's just moisture.
I'll take one of those blue shop towels and just take and break everything down, and you know. And then the other thing is clean when you get home. I mean, it's because you'll neglect cleans, and
because you'll go from hot, cold, in and out of your truck, outside making sets, back in the truck, and then it condensates.
Well, and there's always
and then if you let that moisture sit on the gun, that can be
it can ruin an action in no time.
Well, what's the word I'm thinking of? That'll be a growing point for any deterioration of your steel.
Yeah.
You know, it in a spot that will start to rust, and even in places that you don't see it, like inside the bolt body.
Absolutely,
you know, that's a great place for corrosion to start. But
I kind of look at like Predator rifles as just sacrificial equipment because it's you know, by the time you put them through the ringer, I mean, I've gone through some setups.
Do you prefer bolt action or semi-auto?
That bolt action seems to be a lot more reliable in when you're talking about all these different factors.
For sure.
A semi-auto is always awesome for follow-up shots,
right?
Because things aren't always what they seem. First shot, but yeah, I mean,
or if you get multiples,
and you can do that, you know.
And I know when I was first getting into it, I just went out with my AR, basically, you know, Full Metal Jacket 5.56,
perfect,
and you know. There are issues with those when they get that cold. You know, they don't like it very much. So
you can hear and see that bolt traveling.
Get stuck motion. Halfway back, and you know, it's just not happy at all.
For sure. So, have you ever gone through the ice?
I have. I was trying to beaver trap one time, and I went through thin ice, and that one kind of sticks out in my mind. And so I've gone through, you know, waist deep stuff. I mean, that's not uncommon. I push the limits a little bit, you know,
just trying to cross.
Overflow stuff, or you know, where it's starting to get heavy and the ice ain't real good underneath, and you're like, or you go retrieve something. You don't really think when you set up, like, hey, this is a great spot. You don't really plan out, like, you know, well, if I get something, I'm gonna have to walk across all that dark stuff over there, you know.
Right? No kidding. Yeah, and the overflow can be crazy up here. I've seen it. I mean, I was out caribou hunting one time, and I know a guy that shot a caribou in the middle of winter, and then he fell through.
Oh wow!
Some of those drainage or the creeks down there.
You know, and I'll say it's crazy. I've been out a spot I moose hunt or have moose hunted in the past, and there's one big wide creek. It's like, I don't know, 10 feet wide, 2-3 feet deep. Like, you can usually barely get a wheeler across it, and that's if you know exactly where to ride. And that thing will freeze solid in the wintertime. Yeah. Solid. I mean, freeze solid to the point where the ice falls in onto dry ground underneath. And then there's another creek 5 miles away. That's, you know, it's one of those ditches that's just kind of steep on both sides. Can't get a wheeler across it, not because of the water. That's, you know, 1 foot wide and a foot deep in the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And that one will run all winter long.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
You guys ever see, like, right there on Cushman, right before the range there, the right side? There's always that open water there. And I think Fish and Game usually pulls a couple moose out of there at the end of every year that go through.
Oh really?
Yeah. It just never freezes for some reason.
Interesting. Yeah.
I know when I was down, this isn't up here, but when I was down in Yellowstone, there was a section that we went through, and we had a little tour guide taking us through the park and everything. And he showed us this area, and it was just this wide open flat. And apparently there were ponds everywhere, and it was all snowed over when we were there. It was the middle of winter, but he was pointing out to us that the bison will do that. They'll every once in a while, a young one or just one that's being negligent, I guess, would walk across there. And he says that's the best spot for grizzly viewing in the spring, because the grizzlies just have figured out that there's always dead bison in these ponds.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's like right off the road too. But luckily, I've been lucky on my ventures so far. I haven't fallen through any ice yet. And part of that is maybe just overcaution, because there was one time I was doing a set, and I was right on this lake, and I thought it was perfectly solid and everything. And I went out there, and I'm walking out to set my collar away from me, and I got probably 50 yards out onto the pond, and all I heard was, and I just like started sinking, and I just like through the collar just so I could still make the set. Just start slowly backing out.
Yeah.
All right, that's as far as I go.
Yeah, when I was trying to find spots, these guys are like, "Oh yeah, go out on the rivers," and I'm like, "Well, maybe back when you were running around, but with these warm winters,
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes we don't even get it, water stays open all winter long."
Yeah,
Yeah.
a
Couple of years ago, I was going out to make a set, and I by myself, and I had a little pond that I didn't think was going to be very deep. I thought it was more of a marsh than anything. And I've said before, I'm 6'2". I'm not, I'm a pretty tall fella. And by myself, I was off the road quite a ways. And I had made the set. I was done calling. And I think I'd actually had a fox come in and busted me and took off. And so I was a little bit dejected. And I was out there in the middle of the pond grabbing my collar. And I was walking back out to the trail to go back out towards the truck. It was cold. And I just out of nowhere, I'll preface this by saying I looked up ahead of me and I was walking in my footprints that I had walked in on, and my footprints were full of water from my trip in. And so I'm way overcautious about crossing ice.
Yeah.
I've always been afraid of that.
Yeah, same here.
And I noticed that there was water in my footprints. I thought, well, I hope it's just overflow. But I'm only like 5 feet from the trees now, so I'm fine. And the next step I took, I mean, it was like I free fell through a hole. It just was so fast. I don't even remember falling through the ice. I just don't.
Just next thing you know, boom.
And I went up, and it must have just been reflex, but I had my rifle in my left hand. And I had my collar and my remote in my right hand. And when I went through, my arms were stiff, and I just hit the ice with my hands. And I didn't touch the bottom, and I went almost up to my waist. And I kind of cushioned myself. And I was in the water for maybe 2 seconds before I just launched myself back out, and I just lunged and then rolled to the tree.
It's weird how you find skills you didn't know you had in those situations.
It happened so fast. I like even talking about it. I don't remember doing it. It was just that fast. And then I realized, oh boy, I'm a good distance from the road, and it's really cold. It was 15, 20 below. But I mean, you're wearing all that warm winter gear, and now it's waterlogged and it's 20 below, and you can just see, you look down at yourself and the steam is just pouring off yourself. And so anyway, I started the long, chilly walk back to the truck, and I ran. I mean, I was jogging.
Yeah. You start moving and you don't stop.
You have to in that
just
situation.
Keeping yourself warm.
Time to get home.
And keeping my clothes from getting stiff, keeping my overwhite suit from getting stiff and freezing up. And I had bunny boots on, and I'd gotten water in my boots. But, to be fair, it wasn't a life-threatening situation. I ran back the truck. I was back there in 10 minutes or less. But yeah, I mean, immediately stripping down to my long johns, sitting in the truck. And a friend of mine that I won't name his name on the show, he's an avid predator caller. And he went into the water like up to his shoulders.
Yeah.
He was walking across a pond, and there was a little inlet stream that apparently is warm. And he'd never seen it. It gets snowed over, so you can't tell where it's at on the pond. And he fell through, and it about got him. I mean, his rifle was on his shoulder, and I just remember he showed me a picture of it. His rifle, when he got home, he had it in the shower, just dripping. But it was encased in ice, and it was really cold that night. I don't remember how cold it was out, but I mean, he went in deep, and he didn't touch the bottom either. And he was lucky just to grab himself and pull himself back out.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider.
That was a lot more of a close call than mine was by far. But I mean, I was nervous and tentative about being on the ice before, especially alone.
Right.
But ever since that happened a few years ago, I
you stay away from it.
Well, it's not that I stay away from it.
You were
It's
careful.
just that I'm a lot more observant. And if I'm taking a step and I can feel that there's overflow underneath my feet, I'm walking away. You know, I'm not going to take that chance. It's not worth dying for, you know.
Yeah, I started doing kind of the whatever you call that, the stomp and step method.
Oh yeah.
So you know, as
absolutely.
I'm walking out on the ice, I'm stomping as hard as I can and trying to see if I feel any cracking or any
For sure.
shifting, because it's better if you can use you know, like a long pole or something like that and kind of stab ahead of you, but nobody's going to be carrying that when they're out predator hunting. So
I kind of try to stay away from that danger element altogether.
Do you really?
Yeah. It's that's just too scary.
And there's plenty of areas that are just marshy fields that if you know there's not a lake there, then
And that's the
there's
other
no
thing
risk.
too. You can always just avoid that risk and just pull up on the side of that thing and tuck into some tighter cover and switch plans. There's no need to go swimming, you know?
Yeah.
Well, so we talked a little bit about risky country and everything. And
Yeah.
you wanted to go ahead?
Yeah,
Okay.
I had a quick thing I wanted to say. I grew up with a slough in my backyard, which is like a real slow moving creek. It's full of marsh, but there's also there's areas where it
Sewage.
flows, and not this one, thankfully. We're in Alaska, and it's a really relatively small city, so no, it's not sewage. There's like swampy areas and marshy areas and channels, and then big, deeper, open areas that are more like a river, but just full of like all kinds of weeds and stuff that you fall in the summertime, and you come out with stuff all over you, from muck to three different species.
It's a great place to get swimmer's itch.
It is. Yeah.
Actually, with the moving water, we never had an issue with it there.
Yeah. But the pond down the road, though.
The pond down the road, yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the slough.
Sorry. I just had to bring it up.
But because of that slough, all winter long, as a kid in Alaska who had nothing better to do but learn about learn about ice, I got a tremendous amount of experience in getting wet and got really, really good. And I still retain a lot of that information today is looking at a lake or looking at a pond or a river, and and just you can tell if there's deep snow in the middle, you're usually good. If there's deep snow on the edge, that's where you got to be cautious. Just like you were saying, you're stopping through the deep snow. There was some overflow, which that deep snow creates insulation, which causes that ice to start to melt.
Exactly.
But that snow stays. And just like you said, by the creek, the snow kind of forms on the early ice. There's just enough heat for the ice to melt. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have to go into all that right now. But
that's a great point to bring up. Those
are
great.
Good points for staying out of trouble. You know,
and honestly, the darker ice, especially on a lake, usually that's because it's windswept or something, or because overflow has happened. And when overflows happen, you've got dark ice. That's usually some of the safest places to walk because there's not snow insulating anything underneath.
And I mean, generally speaking, if we have a more typical Fairbanks winter in the interior, if it stays 20, 30 below for the majority of a couple of months, most of the ice is going to be just fine to be on for lakes and ponds. Unless you have like a hot spring inlet, which, there's no way of knowing. You have to be careful about that. Right. But then walking, if you choose to go out on the ice, walking with that mindset of if I go through, what's my reaction? And carrying your rifle in your hand like I did probably helped me a lot to jump out of there in that short amount of time. Because had I had it on my shoulder, that rifle acts as a surface area increase. It's a force multiplier, if you will, in that instance.
Like a snowshoe almost.
Yeah, exactly. And you have more surface area and not buoyancy, but just more
weight dispersion. On
right.
the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. But just having that in mind and preparing yourself that, if you do go through and you get back out, the best thing you can do is to just start running. You don't sit still. Don't freak out. Just, you're okay. You're fine. Get back to the truck and get that heater going.
Yep. And get that gear off.
That's exactly.
Get the wet off.
Don't sit in that stuff.
Yeah. Strip down.
And arguably just applying caution when you're hunting really anywhere in Alaska, but especially when you're out in the cold, potentially wet situation when it's negative 30, you got to really don't be afraid to do it.
Right.
But have it in the back of your mind to have a plan B, C, D, and what's going to happen if I go out here and Not going out onto a lake, a pond, a stream, anything like that.
Yeah.
With a careless attitude.
Right.
You want to make sure you're out there having fun and being successful as possible and
prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that stands true of just about anywhere.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So we talked about a little bit of wet situations, kind of areas to be in. And we've talked about kill boxes and stuff like that too. What would you say you're looking for when you're out there trying to go after these critters? Like what's like and I'm sure it differs depending on what you're going after. So whether it's fox, lynx, coyotes, things like that, like what terrain features are you looking for? What kind of sets are you looking to make when you're out there?
Obviously, like you guys know, it's like any kind of hunting, fresh sign is always good.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys will stay home on a snowy day. That's the day that I want to be out.
Yeah.
Because that's when you can really identify that fresh sign, especially if it's filling in front of you.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the same note. That's not always a good thing to go by, because if a lynx walked through here an hour ago, he might be 3 miles away wandering, and he's not going to turn around and come back and you see what's going on. I mean, in most situations, I don't think, but
yeah.
I'll also call where I don't see sign.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we tend to do is we take the easy route and look out the truck window, and man, I haven't seen any sign in 20 miles. And, just because you don't see that sign right off the side of the road doesn't mean there's not a big thoroughfare 300 yards off. I mean, if they don't have any reason to access the road, they're not gonna.
Right. Yeah.
And I wouldn't write that off. There's been tons of times I've called critters where there's no sign.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's another difference in opinion. A lot of guys, we got short days, so short daylight. Obviously, if you want to make the most of your time calling, and if you can find sign, that's great. But a lot of the time, I wouldn't let that deter you from setting up somewhere. And
do you call it all at night with lights?
What I really like calling under full moon, or leading up to full moon, and then after you get some really good bright nights after a good full moon.
Yeah.
I know I got a couple buddies that run light systems, and they got the pressure switch there, and there's red and green lens.
Yep.
That can be really good. Also, I have the theory that
with lights too.
Yeah. And I also have the theory that if you can see them, they can also see you, right? So you get the notion that you have the upper hand, and that's not really the case sometimes. So
Now, I know you and I had a discussion one time about that, because I was showing you a particular light that I was looking at to purchase, and you had you had mentioned something about you'd noticed the animals here tend to be a lot more light shy.
Yeah, they do.
You can look up on YouTube and everything about these guys, and like you had pointed out with the Midwest and these high density areas, and they're out there blasting any color of light they really care about
in the soybean fields. And,
it doesn't seem to matter. These coyotes and these foxes are just running in anyways. But you said by your experience, it hasn't been your experience up here necessarily.
No, and I've tried this, so it's legal to use artificial light under a trapping license within regulatory season, right? So, I mean, I've tried the whole shining method, and I think shadows are a big one. I haven't had very much success with shining or anything like that. But
so for folks that don't know, explain the shining method.
So you kind of broadcast light. You don't really, you kind of, maybe you guys got a better way to explain this. It's not something I've really dove into much. So you kind of scan. And you generally you have a shooter and you have a scanner.
Yeah.
And then you have a weapon mounted light. And so when you go to take your shot, the idea is that you don't have any lapse between, shining eyes and then getting set up to take a shot.
Yeah.
And so the idea is once you shine, once you spot eyes in some way, shape, or form till that shot's taken, you maintain light on those eyes.
Right.
And I know that the theory there is that if you don't turn the light, they don't think anything's up because the light's always been there.
Right.
The other thing is predators are typically colorblind to red and green. And so they don't, the theory is that they don't see the change in light like we do. Yeah. Because to them, they might notice something's a little off, but they don't see the brightness of a red light or a green light.
Yeah.
And in some areas, I've even seen them using white light, which seems weird to me, but that's the tactic that I've seen most people say where you want to keep your call close to you is because then the animals are coming in looking at you and you'll get that eye shine because they're not looking to the middle of a field somewhere where they're not going to get that, you're not going to get that reflection from the light. And
the way that I've used lights is that exact method. I just wanted to hear your explanation of it. But yes, starting out with always having on, and I've done this alone and called stuff in with it, but it is difficult running a scanner light in my left hand that's just on a very low brightness setting. And it's like just it's not a spotlight. It's more of like a flood style beam. It's just very easily dispersed off. And it doesn't look that bright necessarily. You don't get great visual clarity out of it necessarily. But all you're trying to do is as soon as something steps out, you get the reflection off of their eyes. And that obviously that flags that, okay, there's something standing right there. Or there's something running in across that snow patch. And so then you get it in your rifle. And then, like you said, you have a weapon-mounted light. Now, if you can see well enough with the scanning light, then you can take a shot if you can see well enough. But if you cannot, then a lot of times, and what I've done is I have a barrel-mounted pencil beam light that is aligned with my reticle and my scope, and I just click that light on, and it lights up. I mean, the one that I've used in the past is I think it's Predator, Varmint Lights. I think is the company.
There's like Coyote Cannon. There's
something like that. But it's just and again, it doesn't look like it's that bright of a flashlight when you're just looking at it, just shining it like outside or even in a room. But it's that tiny little dot pencil beam that just goes way out there. And like I said, it aligns with your reticle. And that is, you click that on, and then you need to make your shot quick after you turn that light on, because now they see a difference in the light intensity, and they know something's up. And oftentimes they'll kind of freeze, 2, 3, and then they're going to go.
Right.
And so I've had luck with that method. And one of my mentors for predator calling, he's had a lot of success with that. I mean, a lot of success. He almost exclusively calls with lights.
Yeah.
My dad has killed a lot of critters predator calling, and he prefers just full moon. He does not call very much, if at all, anymore with lights, I don't think. But he loves just morning, evening, and then full moon cycles.
And when you get that full moon on this, especially with the snow cover and everything like that on a clear night,
it's great.
It's not as good as daylight, but it's pert near.
Pretty close. I mean, you can drive with your headlights off, honestly. And not that you should. but you can. It's that bright out. It's awesome.
The definitive advantage I would see to lights versus moonlight is with that eye shine. If you've got a cat that's lingering in the brush and it hasn't exposed itself yet,
I have had that
see
work.
that you can see that eye shine through the bushes as it just peeks its head out, and you might not be able to take the shot right then, but at least you know it's there.
I've had that exact situation happen. And you mentioned earlier having cats that hang up at distance. I've probably had a half dozen different links over the years in my struggling days of predator calling that I'll stand up after 20 minutes or a half hour of a set, and I'll stand up to leave, and I do a quick scan with a rifle, and then boom, a lynx just takes off. And he was sitting in the willows in a riverbank or a creek side or other side of a lake or a pond, and he was just sitting there watching me, and he knew something was up. Decoy wasn't convincing enough or whatever, or he got a smell. And
everybody thinks they're dumb, but I mean,
they're
one of the easier ones,
smart.
But they're definitely smart.
Yeah.
A side note to that full moon is if you can kind of time your trips around that full moon. Is so we have really short days when it's optimal calling time. And so you can utilize that moon to kind of extend your days. So, you're going to have a full moon and you're going to run out of light in 4 hours.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I like to do is I'll run a scope mounted predator light. And and you might have where the moon's starting to build a little bit, but it's not optimal. And you get a little blotch coming across the pond or a clearing, and you can illuminate it.
Right.
And we shoot a lot of stuff like that too. My buddy and I that I hunt with, he kind of turned me on to that. And I'm like, I don't know about this, but I've shot a lot of critters that are just black dots that you can't make out, and you light them up, and it's good too, because sometimes, that moon will come up a little later. Right. So you have that couple hour period there where the lume's not optimal, right?
Between 8 o'clock and 11 or something like that.
Yeah, and it keeps kind of fluctuating as it progresses, those moon phases progress on. So those lights are a good filler for, you can still be successful in your bag for with those lights.
And you just kind of just spot them real quick.
I actually just started doing that last year. And so you'll have the call going, and you can't really make anything out, but you'll catch a blotch kind of moving along. And then what you do is, and it works really good for fox too, is you just light them up and then take your shot. And it's like Dalton was saying, it's a quick gig. It's you don't want to hang out.
No,
it's
that's a great way to do that too. Even with moonlight. Yeah, that light can just give you a little bit more clarity.
I like a dim. I've been kind of getting into the dim green lights, and I don't know if it makes a difference, but a good broad lens, but
Hey guys, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've likely heard Dalton and I go back and forth about bullet construction and how I like rapid expanding bonded core bullets that leave massive wound channels. I've also stated I would never use a monolithic bullet. Well, I'm here to tell you about the company that finally changed my mind. Hammer Bullets produces what I would consider the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are designed so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, the front half of the bullet explodes, shedding its petals and imparting massive damage to the vital areas while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration, effectively closing the gap between lead core and monolithic construction. The guys at Hammer designed these bullets with 100% focus on how they perform once they reach their destination. But don't let that fool you. These bullets have amazing BCs and have specialized pressure grooves built in for amazing inherent accuracy. They have a minimum velocity rating of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots but have no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity rounds like the Weatherby 3378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. They've also recently partnered with Weatherby to provide factory ammunition for a multitude of cartridges. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com to buy yours today and drop the hammer on your next adventure. So one big thing I want to point out before we move on from this is I want to read the actual regulation on here as ADF&G has it laid out, because I think it's important. There's some important definitions in here to keep in mind for any of our listeners that might be intrigued in using this method. So as it reads, it's on page 13 of the trapping regulations, because you can only use artificial light under a trapping regulation in certain units during certain times of the year. So it covers that really well here, but it's a little long, so bear with me. But the opener is, this is in the you may not take.
Okay.
And it's take fur bearers with the aid of a pit, fire, light, other than sunlight or moonlight, laser light excluding rangefinders, electronically enhanced night vision, any forward-looking infrared device, any device that has been airborne, controlled remotely, or communicates wirelessly, and used to spot or locate game with the use of a camera or video device. Any camera or other sensory device that can send messages through wireless communication, artificial salt lick, explosives, expanding gas arrows, bombs, smoke, deer urine, elk urine, chemical, excluding scent lures, or a conventional steel trap with the inside jaw spread over 9 inches. Exceptions, killer-style body grip traps with a jaw spread of less than 13 inches may be used. Now, some of that might sound a little familiar. There was something similar to that in the big game regs. Now, the important part is here at the very end. So it says, artificial light may be used for the purpose of taking fur bearers November 1st through March 31st in units 7 and 9 through 26. So since it does not specify subunits, that's just anything in unit 9 through unit 26. So 20's covered, 14's covered, all of that jazz.
Right.
during an open season and use wireless communication to take a specific animal until after 3 a.m. the following day.
Right.
So it basically follows using
Super Cub
using wireless communication
Super Cub rules
follows aircraft rules.
Yeah.
Now the reason I brought that up is if you're outside units 7 or 9 through 26, you cannot use artificial light any time of year. So make sure you're checking that out.
Right.
And it's only between November 1st and March 31st.
Okay.
But the part I really wanted to touch on here is we've spoken a lot about methods used in the lower 48, and a lot of times if you're watching YouTube videos of guys hunting coyotes or anything like that, they're using those infrared scopes, those night vision, artificial night vision, and that is something that is 100% outlawed here in Alaska.
Right.
So with that, you cannot use it to scout for game, you cannot use it to take game, and you cannot use it to basically have any part of the hunt in general.
Yeah.
So but if you're listening to this and you do want to use lights, headlamps, things like that, within the bounds of this reg I just laid out, it's perfectly usable. So
yeah,
I think that wraps up light.
I was going to ask about what cartridges you like to use for predator calling up here.
Yeah, I was going to say you have a very nice lineup of cartridges that you brought in to show us and to talk about.
So my two go-tos right now are the 17 WSM. I like to anything 200 yards and in. I'm pretty cozy with that. And then anything reaching out is that 204, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay,
and I'm sure that'll change again by mid-season next season.
Yeah,
yeah.
So how long have you been using that WSM, the 17 WSM?
I got it midway through last season.
I was gonna say, I think we talked about it a little bit.
And I dropped a couple cats with it. It was great with that for that.
What are you shooting as far as grainage goes? I can tell it's a VMAX, but is that a 20 grain?
It's a 20 grain, and the box I think is claiming 3,000 FPS. So I mean, it's
really
that
and thing's screaming.
It is. And I think with 100 yard zero, you're looking at a 4.2 inch drop at 200 yards. So for a rimfire, that's pretty sweet.
That's
I
phenomenal.
don't think you could ask for more.
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
And how does it do? I'm sure that VMAX does pretty good, but how's it do on fur?
It does really well.
Does it?
Yeah. So far, it's done great. I've dropped coyotes with it.
Have you really?
Yeah, and I mean it anchors them. So
really, because that's one of the biggest things you see online is people saying, well, it's good for fox and lynx and things like that, but just it's not. There's not enough oomph for coyotes and stuff. And
yeah, I haven't.
And everybody has their opinion, I'm sure, but like I mean,
yeah, and different experiences too.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then the next one here you've got is the 22 mag. That's my personal one I use. So
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. How long have you been? You said you've used that quite extensively.
I
right?
use that for most of the beginning portion of my culling, and that it works great. I mean, it's awesome. And I've shot coyotes out to 100. 135. I think was the furthest with that round, and it works great too.
Nice.
Yeah, as long as you're selective and you're patient.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a big thing with most people is just making sure you're not taking bad shots at these things.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people that
and
have
when
them
you're
run off into the
shooting-
woods and
Yeah, if you're shooting one of these little light rimfire cartridges, a lot of times you're well under 150 yards, preferably under 100 for maximum performance.
yeah,
And that 22 Magnum shoots what, a 40 grain?
it's a 30 grain VMAX.
You can go all the way down to 30. I think you can go all the way up to 50.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know the 22 Magnum that I've used in the past. I've shot 40 grain, just lead soft points, and that they do a good job.
Yeah,
too.
I think it's CCI that makes those, if I remember right.
Mine are Winchester.
Are they the Winchester models? Okay.
I think I have some.
I think they're made in the
similar
same
ones that
factory, but I'm not 100% on that. So
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah,
I have some Remington.
It's like a little silver Winchester box, but yeah.
So you mentioned the 204. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's the only thing I'm not really into is it's pretty limited on bullet selection, but I haven't found anything that's that flat without doping on the fly.
And this is the 204 Ruger cartridge.
204 Ruger.
Yeah.
And, that one's claiming 4225 FPS. And
With how heavy of a bullet? Is that
32 grainer.
32 grainer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they got a 40 grainer, and I know some guys have luck stabilizing that, but a lot of these barrels come 1 and 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I haven't had luck really stabilizing them. I got a buddy that runs a 204, runs both weights, and he doesn't even have to change zero.
wow.
He gets consistent results.
It's just so fast.
Yeah. And I haven't had that luck. I start getting big groups, and
Okay.
you know, that my gun seems to like those 32 grainers.
Okay.
Yeah. I know I've really been looking into getting one of those 204s.
And so, no, sorry to cut you off there. I was going to ask what animals you've shot with that 204 and what the result has been on the hides.
Yeah, fur damage. I've used it on coyotes. It's done really well. I've definitely learned that there's no rifle that's a dual rifle when it comes to predator hunting.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, you're going to bounce around. Most guys that I know are running 2 different calibers. So like I say, that 17 it's the sweet spot between 0 and 100. And if I'm going to be reaching out, I go over to that 204.
Gotcha.
And I don't really put a lot of my fur up for sale. So if I got to sow a messy hole, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
There, you know.
Yeah.
But it works good. It anchors wolves well, which is surprising. You know, everyone's don't shoot a wolf. A 204 won't kill a wolf. Well, you know, that's not true. But
so you have some experience in that, don't you?
yeah, I mean, it does really well. I got a buddy that's taken wolves at pretty good distances, several hundred yards with a 204. Wow. He's the one that sold me on it. And
Okay.
So the only thing I wish they had some bullet availability in that. You get a lot of these like frangible varmint type bullets.
Right.
And I wish they'd make something that was a little more, you know, held together a little better.
Well, that being said, I'm got pulled up right now on Hammer's website. They make a 31 grain, a 39 grain, and a 48 grain in 204. So if you do reloading,
Really?
What type?
they're all the Hammer Hunters, which are the 60 to, we talked about at the beginning, 60 to 70% weight retention, and they just shed the pedals on opening, and then they keep the rest of their weight and plunge all the way through.
I got to try that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. Actually, I was texting these guys about that earlier this week, how they do on fur, because it essentially, it acts just like a VMAX on initial impact and just kind of explodes, and those front pedals shut off, and all you're left with is just a diameter sized shank.
Right.
That would definitely poke through the other side, but I've never haven't even reloaded any yet, so I would be interested to see what those do to fur.
Yeah,
and maybe we can
here.
test that out next winter.
That'd be cool. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on a couple of those.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what kind of ranges do you think that 204 like that?
For me, you know, I'm not a pro shot or anything. 300 yards is my window.
Okay.
And
Nice.
I know guys that have shot wolves out to 500 yards with that. That's not something I do for my confidence level. I mean, I know where my limitations stand. So
Right.
300's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And if I'm not getting 300, I'm going to get on step and close some distance, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And you just keep them both in the truck, and wherever you end up, just kind of pick one.
yeah, that's pretty much it. If I'm, you know, if I got a short field of view and I don't need that much gun, there's no sense in hauling that 204 out, you know?
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, and I don't know if you were going to ask this or not,
Go for it.
but I don't think we've talked about it yet. Have you used shotguns at tight stands before?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of my really good buddies that I hunt with, he swears by it. He loves shotgun and stuff, and I can't stand it.
No? Okay.
No.
So talk about why you don't like it and talk about why your buddy likes it.
I mean, it's effective.
Okay.
You know, I think a lot of guys that are doing that, they're running number 4
Okay.
and double aught.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty hard on fur
I was
sometimes.
going to say, that seems pretty big.
Yeah, that seems like it would tear
And
it up.
surprisingly enough, I mean, I remember back in my tinkering with trapping days, I snared a fox one time that was just loaded with birdshot.
Really?
And I mean, the fur was fine. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I'm not into the idea. I think like your 22 mag you're running,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a great close quarters gun.
Right,
You put something
yeah.
with a low variable on that,
Yep.
and you can treat that like a shotgun.
Right.
You know, in close, out out of ways. So you can cover a lot of ground with a 22 mag.
Yeah, and I've known guys that use shotguns personally too, and it's the benefit to it when you're in those tight areas, and when we say tight, we mean like
50 yards.
Yeah, I would say even tighter than that, where your visibility is so slim that the second they come out, it's
a swing shot.
Yeah, you're snap shooting these things, and for that purpose, I think maybe if your intent is just to be successful on a hunt, but I've just never gotten around the whole.
There's a lot of guys that like that, just throwing the call at your feet and just like getting the rush.
I just can't get over how hard it is on fur.
One of my mentors hunts an area that I can't disclose.
Right.
How do I say this? He has to use a shotgun.
Yeah.
And that's what allows him to hunt this particular spot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he has had a lot of success with a shotgun, but it's with these, if it's a pond or like a slough bed or something where your visibility is 50 yards or less, and when something comes out and closes that distance, like I said, you're well under that 50-yard mark.
Yeah.
And he's had pretty good luck with it, but I've never used it. And he hasn't had bad results on fur, but he also uses heavy enough shot that he's going to kill it if he's getting it.
Right.
Some double aught or something.
He's also used it shooting lynx in like the willows and stuff.
Yeah.
Like in an instance where you might deflect a little 22 caliber bullet, he's able to just throw a pattern through there and kill it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys that do it. And I mean, to each their own.
I was just curious if you'd ever tried it.
One time I had a bait pile going, and it was a full moon, and I got busted by a fox, and I had a 22 mag, and I swung on him, and it just wasn't happening. So I let a few days go by, let stuff simmer down, and I went out there with a 410 with buckshot.
Okay.
And he came back in the exact same way, and I nailed him at about 7 yards.
Okay. Yeah.
And it wasn't awful, but it wasn't optimal,
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny.
So along those lines, what are some ones you've used that you will just never use again? Do you have any that just completely marked off the list? Just cut something in half, or just totally?
I'm reluctant to answer that because I don't want to like lead anybody.
Just your personal opinion.
There's a lot of them.
300 Win Mag, 300 Weatherby.
Right.
Well, it's crazy. I've had buddies kind of like Mo was talking earlier, take wolves with 300 Win Mag.
Oh, yeah.
And surprisingly enough, if it's, if you got 300 yards, or the right bullet, your fur damage can be pretty minimal. Right. They're pretty dense creatures. So
the wolves that I've shot have been with the 7 mag as well. And the first one I shot, you were there. It was a 350, and it didn't mess up the hide at all.
Which I was amazed at because I was expecting like a softball size hole out the other side.
But I mean, for coyotes and foxes, I shot a coyote with a 300 Win Mag one time. I was in the mountains looking for bears, and my father-in-law and I were on a hunt together. We actually have film of it, and we spotted a couple of coyotes up on this ridge top, and they had a dead caribou, and I think there was 4 of them on the hill. And I just saw them running away through the brush. Hey, there's coyotes up here. Mm-hmm. So we hunkered down, and I always have a mouth call on me, even for bear hunting.
Absolutely.
You just get their attention and bring them in. So I grab my mouth call out of my bino harness, and I start wailing on that call after we got some cover. And one of them turned around and just was beelining it right back in. Turned around from dead run away just to come running right back in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he came into, 90 yards, and I shot him with a 300 Win Mag. And I was even shooting a Barnes bullet, but with that kind of velocity at that range, I tore a 2-fisted hole out the side.
Right.
Kind of trashed that one. And then my first silver tip fox, I guess my only silver tip fox, I was caribou hunting with my 7mm Remington Magnum with 139 grain LRX, which is screaming. It's 3,300 feet a second. And the silver tip fox had run across the area I was hunting, and so I got out my call, just a mouth call again, and called him right back out, and I shot him at about 40 yards. And that one, I could have probably fit my foot through the hole on the
I was going to ask
of it.
you got 2 Fox for 1 on that one.
Yeah, just about. I mean, I picked it up and as the guts were hanging out of it, I was so sad about that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to let it get away because I mean, it wasn't too bad once I got it tanned and it was just a wall hanger. It wasn't a big deal. And the top of the back, which is the prettiest part anyway, was still well intact. So you got all that silver tip hair that was just beautiful.
Once you get them tanned up, you can hide a lot, especially if you're throwing up on the wall. You're not going to see that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly.
You comb them out and you don't know the difference.
Still not ideal, especially if you're looking for hide preservation. Those are not calibers that I would recommend.
Yeah, and I'm sure there is. I mean, there's guys, I'm sure there's guys making a little dough off of predator calling. And I mean, I do too sometimes, gas money and ammo money, scope money and stuff. But your numbers aren't like running a 200-mile trap line and where you're I don't really worry too much about fur damage when it comes to that. You're usually wall hanging them or gifting them, and it's something you can work around. And if you got to sew a big hole, learn to baseball stitch.
Yeah,
right.
And we all know how to do that.
Yeah.
The 223, I ran that for a long time, and it just didn't seem to have the steam.
Yeah. Like for the longer ranges, or
for the longer ranges, and it just didn't. It just kind of seemed to run out of gas.
Okay.
Yeah, I know there was one time, and I kind of just didn't really anchor them like I wanted to with that 223 a lot of the time. They'd be kill shots, but you'd be doing track jobs.
Right.
And I remember one time I shot this coyote at like 210. I ranged him out at 210 and hit him, and I look through the binos and I see a little hole in the snow, and I'm like maybe that was just a clean miss, And I walk down there, no blood, no nothing. Walk uphill where he went, and I'm like, this thing took off. I'm like, he's unscathed. And I walked all the way back to the truck, and I'm like, you know what? Grabbed the 22 pistol, dropped all my gear. I'm like, I'm going to go back up. So I went all the way back down to where I took that shot on him.
Yeah.
Walked back uphill 100 yards, almost turned around and walked back to the truck, walked 50 more yards, and looked up about probably 25 yards ahead, and he was dead under a tree.
No kidding.
And I mean, so, I like the idea of just dropping them.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
It worked for a long time. I used it for years. That 223 is, it's abundant. You can practice a lot.
Yep.
I wouldn't not use it if it's what you got. But there's better stuff out there.
And that's the biggest complaint I've seen online when people are talking about using the 223 is just having to track more often than with other cartridges for some reason. And
sorry, go ahead.
I think part of that is that a lot of times with a 22 of that stature, you're trying to use more solid bullets to hold together because it's not like a rimfire 22.
Right.
These bullets are longer, they're heavier, and I think in a lot of cases that doesn't lead to the amount of trauma that you're looking for out of something like a 223.
I was just going to ask what bullets you were shooting. If you remember, if those were full metal jackets or if those were expanding bullets.
I was running I think I was running an FMJ on that, but I've had that happen. I've run the 53 grain, what is that, Superformance?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's pretty flat. It's cooking, a little faster. And I've run into the same issues, just, runners and just not how I like to do things personally.
You ever use a 22-250?
I actually just kind of ended up with one in a trade, and I was going to kind of endeavor on it, but I haven't got around to that.
Yeah.
It's okay. I don't know that it's the best thing.
I've heard mixed reviews on that, honestly.
Okay.
It's one of those things where, again, when you look at the lower 48 hunters, and everybody rants and raves about the 22-250, and I had one for a time, and I didn't have it long enough to actually shoot anything with it. I took it out on a couple sets and didn't end up seeing anything on either of those, and then I ended up trading it for a bigger rifle for a different purpose. I have a problem with that. But
same.
Yeah. But the reports I've heard up here is that with the smaller animals, it just cuts them in half. And there's really, with that amount of velocity in that kind of a bullet, it's just fox and lynx. There's no like safe avenue to go.
I think if you're hand loading and you want to get a little more steam, you can run a 55 grain FMJ and a 22 250, and then you got to have a barrel twist that supports that, and you start getting into all kinds of wacky and
that's what my dad started out with, was a 22 250, and but part of his issue with it was a big varmint barreled Remington 700 with a heavy, wide fore end stock, and now he shot a pile of fur with that gun. I mean, he still shoots it every once in a while, but I mean, fox, it just tears them apart.
Yeah.
I mean, huge holes.
And the one I had was the Bergara B14 HMR Pro.
Okay.
And so it was a monster of a rifle.
Yeah,
I mean, same thing. It was
heavy.
a big bull barrel. I mean, the thing weighed more than my 300 Win Mag does.
Yeah.
And it was extremely accurate and extremely comfortable to shoot.
Yeah.
And the Bergaras, the newer ones, are actually coming out with the tighter twist rates for heavier bullets. And so the older ones, you're typically going to find like the 1 in 12, 1 in 14. That's meant for like the 35 grain bullets that are zinging out there at like 4,400 feet per second.
That Ruger is that I have, and that's what kind of stalled me up on running those 55 grainers.
Yeah. But yeah, the Bergara that I had came with a 1 in 9 twist, and I know Tika's making one that has a 1 in 8 twist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you can really start to stabilize some of those. I think I was shooting, I want to say they were 60 grain partitions out of mine. Just I happened to find a bunch of boxes of those, and they were the only 22 250. And they were amazing. I mean, I was shooting sub MOA all day, and you can hand load up to they have 75 grainers, 77 grainers, and things like that. I mean, heck, these days they have even heavier ones than that you can load in the 22s. But it just, if you loading bullets that big, you're gonna slow it down a skosh.
Right.
So the debate I was having in my head was, if you slowed it down with that heavier bullet, would that be better on fur? And I never actually, I didn't have the rifle long enough to test that theory.
The other thing too is you start kind of like taking away from what the cartridge was initially intended for.
Right,
You start kind of going back to reinventing the wheel.
Well, I know my dad has downloaded his 22 250 with some hand loads, and he's had a lot better results with that as well. So if you have the time and the ability to do that and kind of experiment with that, then that might be a good option.
So one point that kind of comes to mind is if you're out like on a winter caribou hunt and you want to run something that might kind of cover the gamut, you do have to keep in mind that those 17 calibers are not legal for big game.
Yep, centerfire only.
That 204 is not legal. It's 22 centerfire or greater is what the regs read.
Okay.
And that's something too. I've been kind of looking for something in that sweet spot where I can run a 22 caliber bullet. Where if I come across a wolf or whatever, I'm gunned up for a couple different occasions, and you just can't. That goes back to that thing. You're not gonna. It's hard to find one gun for everything.
Right.
And
I've seen some pretty impressive results even with white-tailed deer in the lower 48 on the 22 250 note. Guys seem to love that for deer. It doesn't really exit ever. It just grenades inside of it. And if you keep it in the ribs, then you're not losing much meat, if any. And but they're also, if they have a coyote run across their stand, that's dead meat too. So, I mean, not edible meat by any means, unless you're.
I'd be willing to try it.
Depends on where you're at, I guess.
Yeah. Right. The hard thing is that there's such a size difference between these animals. I mean, you've got fox that are just absolutely tiny.
Yeah.
And then coyotes are around here, 25 pounds? 30 pounds.
You can get them
30, 35.
I've shot them in the 40 range.
Yeah. I think my dad and my uncle shot a couple that were over 40 over the years, but not very many in that big range.
And then like from there you jump right up to wolf.
Right.
Which is, 130, 140 pounds.
130,
Well,
140 is a huge wolf.
Yeah, that's a monstrous wolf.
But 90
I've heard even bigger ones than that.
Well, me too. But 90 to 120 is kind of your average range
Yeah.
you're looking at.
Yeah, for sure.
That one I got was 87 pounds, and I mean, I could have sworn it was 120. And it was still just a tank.
Well, and on that note, a lot of people, just on the weight topic, a lot of people in the lower 48 like to gauge things off of weight, whether it's predators or even bears.
Mm-hmm.
And that bothers me because people in Alaska that are transplants from the lower 48 come up here and they shoot a 5.5 foot black bear. And they'll swear up and down that bear was 300 pounds and he was so stocky.
No.
Man, he was all hair.
Yeah.
He looked big. But I guarantee you the average black bear in the interior of Alaska is average 150 to 225 pounds.
Yeah.
And a 250 pound bear is an absolute slob up here.
I think they even say that in the reg somewhere. It's it's around 200 pounds.
People,
somewhere in there.
and then the brown bear thing. Mm-hmm. People love to ask, well, how much does a brown bear weigh? And some outfitters love to throw numbers out there just
2,500 pounds.
No, not necessarily that extravagant, but I've definitely heard numbers. Oh yeah, 1,800 pounds. I'm like,
that's nuts.
Are you high? That's just nonsense. I mean, a monstrous brown bear would be 1,100 pounds, and that's a fall bear. After he's been eating fish for a month and a half.
Yeah.
Your average spring, even a 10-foot brown bear is not going to weigh 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. One thing I was talking to Dalton about earlier when we were on the break is I've seen fox soak a lot of lead. Yeah. And I know some guys are like, huh? But I mean, several of us have seen it. And one of my really good Cullen buddies that we hunt a lot, he's a biologist, and he knows quite a bit about this kind of stuff. And I was asking, I said, what do you make of that? And he goes, well, fox are pretty dense. He goes, when you think about it, he goes, a fox is a third of the size of a coyote and half the weight. In some cases.
Interesting. Okay.
And I thought that was an interesting perspective because you think, they're pretty docile, but they can soak lead.
Yeah.
And, that goes back to that like ground deception, right? You walk up to a lynx that's just this big old tom with a giant noggin, and you go to pick it up and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
It's all, it's all fur and bones. And they're built that way to traverse through that deep snow and stay on top. And, and I think that's coyotes.
Well, and just to that note about cats, I've got a good friend of mine that's killed a couple of lynx with a 22 Magnum. And the last one he shot was at 110 yards with that 40 grain lead soft point bullet and just hammers them. I mean, it just puts them right down.
Yeah.
No flinching, no flopping. The last lynx that I was a part of on that kill, someone that was with me shot it. It came out on his side, and he was shooting the same gun that I had shot at that time, which was a 243 with an 80 grain discontinued Hornady full metal jacket, and that he had hand loaded, and I have hand loads for that as well. That slow it down a little bit, but then you've got a little bit more frontal diameter, a little bit bigger bullet.
Yeah,
just going a little bit slower. But it's a little more capable if you get a wolf that comes in on a set where you're not maybe expecting it, but it doesn't tear up the fox and lynx and coyotes nearly as bad as it would like if you were shooting a 95 grain expanding 243 bullet at full velocity.
Yeah.
But that lynx that came in on that set, he shot it and just absolutely clobbered it, and it just went straight down.
Yeah, they go down pretty easy. Yeah. I mean, it's usually one and done.
The only lynx the story that I know of that gave any issues with being shot and not wanting to go down actually was my dad, and I believe it got away from him. I think he was shooting a 22 Magnum, and I think it was out past 150, and it was one of those situations where he was done calling and he got up to leave and he turned around and saw it.
Yeah.
And he just made a quick offhand shot, didn't quite realize how far it was, and he blood trailed it for a long ways and never could quite catch up to it. I think he might have bumped it once, but I don't think he got that one. And then he's had issues with the 17 HMR. I know a lot of guys got on that bandwagon pretty quick. I don't know how much experience you have with it, but like Fox,
minimal.
Fox and Lynx inside 80 yards, it seems to be dynamite.
I think it's great for that application.
Yeah. But once you get out towards 100 yards or more, it just loses that steam pretty quick.
It does. It's super light. It just doesn't carry energy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm really big on running light bullets. Like even that 22 mag, I get my buddy that I hunt with a lot. He runs the 40 grainers,
right?
And I love running that 30 grain.
Yeah,
and it's you get a little more flatness.
Yeah.
But that 17, I've seen Fox soak that 17 too.
Yeah,
but it's not to discredit it. I mean, it's still a good tool, but you need to know its limits.
Yeah.
I've heard guys say, "Oh, you can shoot coyotes with a 17 HMR at 150," and that's just not my deal. And like,
well, in the 17 WSM is one thing. That's a screamer coming out.
Talk about
there.
the difference between those two, so folks know.
So the HMR is the smaller. It's not the smallest 17, but it's one of the smaller ones. And I don't have the anything pulled up right now on the backstory of it, but it's unless you do,
There's you got the Mach 17, which is it's basically the neck down version of like a 22 long rifle,
right?
Okay,
yep,
and then you jump up into I believe the next step up is like the 17 HMR, which is a neck down 22 mag case.
Okay, yeah.
So,
yeah, and so with that, it's a good cartridge for up close if you're gonna be within like 50 yards or something like that. But your weight is gonna be, typically down in the 15 to 20 grain range is what you're gonna find in factory ammo
velocity?
for that.
I think it's like 26.
It's not fast. Yeah,
okay.
It's pretty slow. It's about the 17's equivalent of a 22 LR. And so the 17 WSM is the one I've really focused on because that one. It's actually a pretty fascinating. The cartridge itself is a 27 caliber blank cartridge that they use in power actuated nail guns for a job site. And somebody at some point decided, let's neck that thing down and throw a 17 caliber bullet in it.
Pretty slick.
It works phenomenal, and it has great ballistics for what it's intended for.
So there's another 17, the 17 Remington.
Oh, the Fireball.
I think.
They're the same thing.
Yeah. And that one, you talk about moving.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's well over 4,000.
Well, and when you get up into that, because I believe the 17 Remington is a center fire, I want to say.
I believe
and
so.
There's several center fire 17s.
Yeah. Once you get into the center fires, man, they get screaming. You've got the 17 Hornet that's just absolutely moving.
The Fireball.
Yeah.
That's another good one. Yep. I've looked at that too.
Yeah. But the rim fires, I like them for the rim fires. And I don't know, but those center fire ones, that's kind of the thing. There's so many different options and so many different opinions on what works and what doesn't. So
back in the day, my grandpa, when he lived in California before they moved up here in the late 70s, he was doing some predator calling in Southern California, out in the desert there, and he would call in bobcats and coyotes and whatnot. And he shot a Wildcat 17 for a while. I think it was a correct me if I'm wrong, but does it sound right? I think it was a 17 223.
Yeah, so it's a 223 case neck down to 17 caliber.
I believe that's what it was.
I'm actually wanting to build one.
He shot, but my family has that old rifle, and anyway, but he shot that for bobcats and coyotes down there. That's an electric performer.
So on that note, a lot of rimfire cartridges are very finicky in the cold. That's one thing I've learned. Extremely finicky. That's another thing, I guess, to highlight.
So why is that?
You would probably have better insight to that than I do. I don't know if it's the primer system.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a QC thing.
The only thing I can think is it would be either the primer system with being a rimfire.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't ignite as hot in the cold.
Yep.
But the other thing could be that the powder they use could be very temperature sensitive.
Yeah.
So that's something I've had in mind is going to the 17223 and loading it with Varget.
Yeah.
Right. And then bringing it maybe just a skosh over the 17 WSM speeds, like maybe up in the 35 range, because that's pushing 3,000 feet per second. If you chrono that in the cold, you'll get more like 28, 29.
Oh, really?
That's in my rifle anyway.
Okay.
That's a pretty significant difference.
You get down into like 5 below and they start slowing down. And I don't know the ins and outs of that. I have a lot of theories, but one way around that I've thought of is doing a 17223.
Yeah.
And running some temp stable powder in there and a little more QC and then you can kind of refine that to application, right?
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah.
And then I know some guys are doing the 17204.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah. So I
Whoa.
guess when you're starting to, and there again, you probably have some better insight on this, Dalton. But like when you neck that down from 22 cal to 17, you put a lot of strain on that brass.
Yeah.
So there's a couple steps. So I think they sell a 19223 die, resizing die, so that you can segment that, right? So that you're not doing that all in one swoop. And then there's annealing because you've put that brass under so much pressure.
Right.
Right. So a lot of guys, they'll run that. You have a little more case capacity in that 204. And it's already on its way to that 17, right?
Right.
So
it's a lot closer than that 22.
Less steps, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So with the rimfire, having problems in the cold, I used to shoot squirrels and I shot hundreds and hundreds, thousands of rounds of 22 long rifle out of pistols and rifles as a kid. And I remember, and it never even occurred to me that the cold was the issue. I just thought it was quality control. Why random, just seemed like totally random rounds it was just, it was cheap boxes of 500 or whatever that I was shooting, right? There's
the bulk ammo.
Right. But yeah, it'd be random rounds, they just wouldn't go off. And, and I actually have one really old revolver that is direct. The firing pins on the hammer, it just direct fire to the, very old, not safe.
Yeah.
But that one, I would cycle it. Like I would fire through it and it would miss fire all the time.
Yeah.
And I would just cycle through it again and then go off. And I wonder, actually, one other thing with the cold is steel can be, or not steel, metal can be more dense. And if the brass is just a little bit harder in the cold.
Yeah, that's possible.
Could be.
If it's a little bit, it would take a little harder hit or compression. So especially in like a rifle, like say a Ruger 1022, where you don't necessarily have a hard hit from the firing pin in those, it could the denser metal may cause that problem.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another good point to bring up is make sure, and I see this so often, guys go out, they buy a rifle, they set it all up. It's a tack driver. They do it at 70 degrees beginning of August, and they run out Christmas morning, and that thing's all over the map, right? So make sure that you zero in the conditions you're going to be hunting in. And it's, that's that whole thing. These critters are few and far between. So if you're going to go through all the work to call one in, go through the work to make sure your stuff's dialed in.
No kidding.
And
that's a great point.
And the other thing too is if there's going to be big temp swings that you're working in or elevation changes, go ahead and make sure you dial that up to where you're going to be. Right. If you're gonna go climb in elevation, just pull off somewhere and range out 100 yards and verify, because I mean that's a bummer. Ask me how I know.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's true of any cartridge. I mean, if you're coming in from, I think at Fairbanks we're at 400 feet above sea level.
Yeah,
and
right about there.
Yeah, I think it's just over, but we'll just say 400, and then you go up into the White Mountains, and you're up in 25. 100 feet, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
At some of the road areas there. I mean, the difference in how conditions can affect your bullet as it flies through the air is amazing.
Well, a lot of it is just working the numbers and figuring up dope for different temperatures and different elevations.
Yep. Yeah. And you can figure all that out. Keep a chart specifically for that and just utilize that when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Now, I want to jump off the smaller ones for a second. And you had mentioned the 243, Dalton.
Right.
But you have recently started using the 6 arc.
Yeah.
And, tell us a little bit about that. And if you had a chance to shoot anything with it
I've
yet,
been
or?
shooting. No, I haven't. I've been tinkering with it a little, and I'm still kind of refining it a little bit. And I'm working the bugs out. So
yeah.
I know, Mo, you've been looking to get one of those.
I have been, and so I was bugging his ear about all kinds of questions about it before the show.
I think I probably about the same level of knowledge you are on it at this point. It's just go spend time shooting it.
Yeah, I haven't shot one yet. It's an interesting looking cartridge because it's got a really short, fat case with a really long bullet. And so it's got kind of a distinct difference from a lot of other ones. It looks like a 6.5 Grendel basically, which I think it's the same case, right?
Yeah,
just neck down.
Yep, it's based off the 6.5, just neck down to 6mm.
Right. Nice.
So I think it's got a little steeper shoulder, if I remember
it might,
right.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of guys that collect 6.5 Grendel brass specifically to neck down for their 6mm arc. Because when it first came out, the ammo was readily available, and supply seems to be dwindling quickly.
Yeah,
or demand is just going.
Yeah.
Could be that.
Yeah.
When I first started looking into it several months ago, it was widely available on the internet. And now it's not.
Yeah.
So,
it's all the rave right now.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
Glass?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I heard you mention it one time, Dalton, and I'm a big Leopold guy, as I'm sure you've figured by now.
Yeah.
And I think you said one time on an episode, the best warranty you'll never need.
Right.
And I am, I love Leopold for this stuff. It seems to be, I've gone through a lot of different scopes, trial and error. Yeah. And Leopold seems to just make the best applications or best scopes for the application.
Being out in the cold, and like we mentioned earlier with your rifle maintenance, and your steel care on your gun, that's a great test for your glass as well, because when you go hot cold, it condenses. And if you have a rifle scope with faulty seals, you'll get condensation inside your supposedly sealed tube. And a lot of guys talk about, oh yeah, my scope fogs up in the cold, but other than that, it's been solid. Okay, well, that's not solid. Because if you dip that baby in the water, it's going to take on some drops.
I have a window in my house that all winter long has had a permanent haze in parts of it from condensation because it's not, the panes aren't sealed like they're supposed to be.
Right, right. But yeah, the Leupold, I have used Leupold. I started out with an old Redfield scope, Predator calling, and it worked great. It didn't have any issues.
I ran a full field for a long time.
Yeah. And but Redfields are made in the same factory as the Leupolds are.
Yep.
But yeah, as far as glass goes, I mean, we've like you mentioned, we've hit on that before. But a lot of guys love to just run into Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's or Bass Pro, and they look for the most affordable option. And while Leupold does have the VX Freedom line, which is very affordable, and I've had no issues with. I've had a couple of them through the years on smaller rifles like that. I never had an issue with them, but we're just going to go ahead and say it. Vortex does a great job of marketing a lot of different models of scopes, and they have a great VIP program for store employees.
Yeah,
where they get incentive for selling Vortex products, and they earn points to get free stuff, and so the salesmen a lot of times are trying to push that brand. And I have had a couple different Vortex scopes of high end on their production line completely fail, and it's always been the seals. It's not been the dials. It's not been the clarity necessarily. It's been the seals that have failed, and I've gotten water in a couple different scopes, and just condensation on the inside of the lens. We're not talking about the exterior surface,
right? Yeah,
that's going to happen if you breathe on it and it's cold out. That's just exterior moisture. That's just on the surface. But we're talking about the argon or nitrogen purged sealed tube inside the glass housing.
Right.
And that is not supposed to have moisture in it ever.
No,
and if it does, then you need to be looking at your warranty program.
Yeah, because once that moisture gets in there, it just wreaks havoc on everything in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did the warranty work as advertised?
It did, and then when I got the new one in the mail, I sold them.
Yeah.
I didn't even take them out of the box. I just put it on Alaska's list and brand new in the box, and I sold it for half the price that I paid for it happily.
Yeah,
I had a couple buddies go the Vortex route, and I did my homework, and I'm like, I want to wait and see what happens with you guys, and they all went back. I got a buddy that's got I think his is on the third go round, with a warranty.
My goodness.
Well, I mean, Leopold is awesome. I had a friend's buddy drop one of my Predator rifles on the asphalt, or a friend's buddy's young daughter dropped my rifle right on the ground. She said, "Can I look at that?" And I pulled the bolt, and he's like, "I wouldn't do that." And she dropped it right on the ground, and I went, "Okay." So I call Leopold, and I go, "Hey, this is kind of my deal. I let a kid handle this thing." And he, "Oh yeah, cool." And I said, "Yeah, she dropped it, and it's jacked up." And he goes, "Well, that's cool that you're letting her do that, and let me see what we can do here." And I think I had that scope back in 3 days of sending it.
What?
And then and it was outdated. And he goes, we don't have that one anymore, but I'll give you one that's of greater value."
Nice.
I hope they don't mind me saying that.
Very
if
nice.
they hear this, but I mean, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, it was almost a blessing that she dropped that thing.
And that's kind of a thing that a lot of people don't realize is most of these optics companies hold a very similar, if not exactly the same, warranty that Vortex does. I know guys that use all kinds of different scopes, and every few years they'll actually take them off their rifles and send them in and get them checked out and make sure that they're good, because the warranty covers that. You can literally send it back to the manufacturer, have them make sure everything's okay, and then they send it back to you saying, "Yep, looks good. You haven't broken anything."
Yeah.
You throw it back on your rifle. You just throw 3 to 5 rounds to re-zero, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that because Vortex advertises their warranty so much, and I just don't think that should be the point. The point you're advertising with your.
If you have to advertise that you'll replace it for free and make that your selling point, then I'm a little concerned about that. That should be a red flag in my opinion.
I got a buddy that's just so anti-Vortex, and he's like, "Yep, you'll be using that warranty."
There's nothing wrong.
I got Leopolds on everything now, and they are just rock solid, and I put them through the ringer.
Yeah, I think the majority of my rifles right now have Leopolds. I have one Leica right now that I've been really, really impressed with. It's a 3:18 Amplus 6i. It's a really good scope. It's got a 6-power zoom ratio. It's a 3:18, which is like the equivalent to a VX6.
That's what I put on that 6 arc that I got as a VX6 fire dot, and it's awesome.
And the Leica has an illuminated reticle, has some hash lines in it. That's the scope that I used in Southeast on my deer rifle last year, and I had great results with it. It's great glass, but again, same almost the same warranty. And even if they charged me $100 to send it back and get it resealed, I would happily do it.
Right.
Because it's a better product.
Yeah.
And that would only ever happen if I absolutely beat the crap out of it.
Yeah, we've told stories on what those scopes go through here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember.
I mean, your go-to brands need to be Leupold, Night Force, Leica, Swarovski, Zeiss.
Zeiss
and,
is great.
Glass is not a place to skimp on quality.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's.
Honestly, I thought you were going to say the rifle got dropped on the asphalt and you picked it up and it still held zero and was great.
No, and I've yeah,
I've done that too.
I've done that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some that they look bad, but they're not warrantyable,
Yeah.
No, it was pretty banged up, but it was a good drop, and it was on a heavy bull barrel rifle, and so I mean, it was definitely out of commission. But it was swift. I sent that thing in.
Wow.
And the guy's like, "You got any plans?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this guy's just talking to me. He doesn't really care." I mean, he's like, "I'm going to get this thing back to you right away."
Wow.
I mean,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Kudos to them. But
They're awesome.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Not to become a bashing fest. But
but quality is quality, and
it is, yeah.
we don't recommend subpar products. So
Yep.
That's right.
that's that.
Yeah.
And even their lower end line, Leopold's lower end line, is just awesome to put on a Predator rifle or
the VX Freedom is a great lineup of scopes, and you can get the VX Freedoms as cheap as $300.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. That's a great option,
and it's good glass.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome. And then the VX3 HD, that's in the $500 range, sometimes in the $400 to $450. Then the VX5 is the next one that's up closer from $850 to $1,000. And the VX6 is over that $1,000 mark.
Oh, sometimes well over that 1,000.
Yeah.
There's something for everybody there, though.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to a different company to get a better price. And that's what's great about them, too.
Another thing I've noticed, too, with the Leopolds is the glass quality is so good in the light transmission.
Yes.
So when I started predator hunting and kind of going through my trial and error of running different glass,
right,
I always had the mindset, I have to have this huge front objective to gather as much light as possible.
Yeah.
And with a good scope, you don't need to have these giant front objectives.
Yeah.
I mean, you can keep it. A 44 is pushing it on a VX6.
Yeah. A big difference there is the coatings that these different companies use. The glass, primarily the actual physical glass, is made in almost the same place. I know there's a couple factories around the world, but for the most part, they're coming from the same place. The big difference is that each manufacturer has its own proprietary coatings that they put on the glass, which is what protects it from fog, protects it, kind of aids in that light transmission, and just does. It helps with the anti-glare is a big one too. Certain coatings are better for anti-glare if you end up, especially in the wintertime up here when the sun is so low on the horizon, you end up facing the wrong direction for whatever reason. That can be a big factor. You look through your scope and all you see is bright white lines coming through it, and that's never a good thing. So sticking with the quality optics that shoot or that put those kind of coatings on there. I mean, it's night and day difference, almost literally.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Well, I think we've hit on a lot of different things, but
we have.
Do we know what time we're at?
We have been going for 2 minutes and 30 or 2 hours. Yeah, well, I'm tired.
It's the longest 2 minutes of my life.
2 hours and 33 minutes. So we're not quite to our longest episode yet, but we're gonna probably beat it unless we get out of here quick.
Well, I just wanted to cover two things. We've covered a lot of different topics here as far as like cartridges and whatnot. But what are
if you don't mind. So another thing too is, and this goes for a lot of different hunting applications, when you're setting up, try to set up with the sun at your back.
Yeah.
If you're going to be going for canines, carry some kind of wind reading device, and that's huge. Play the wind. For a long time, I didn't think that mattered, and I had a buddy correct me on that. He's good, and he was like, if you change this, you're gonna see your success rate go through the roof. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And getting my spirit beat out of me a couple times. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try this wind thing, and it's crucial,
night and day.
Yeah, and setting up with the sun at your back. If you're passing a spot you want to hit, and that sun's gonna be coming in, head on, maybe wait till the end of the day to hit that spot and come back when that sun's low and at your back, and it's kind of plan that, and that's another thing. If you're starting on one end of you're down in a valley or something, and you're going to hit a few different spots, read the wind, because you don't want to start upwind,
right?
And that's a big
blow
one.
The valley out.
Yep, and people don't realize that you go 4 or 5 miles down a valley and it's smoked. It's it was over before it was done on the first stand. So use the wind. Start it, wherever it's heading. Yeah, work that wind and work your way up and think that way. And even if you're going for cats or whatever, something that's a little less sensitive to scent, don't blow it, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, that's the fun of it too. You never know what's going to show up. That's what's just so enjoyable about predator calling.
Yeah. And that's easy enough to do for people that don't know. I mean, they sell these little bottles of powder, and I forget exactly. There's several different brands.
Windicator.
I was gonna say Windicator, but I think Windicator is actually a device, electronic device you can use. I want to say.
Is it really?
I want to say. Really? I'm not 100% sure, because I call it a Windicator, but
that's what I've always called it.
I've been told that's incorrect. I might just be wrong. I never actually cared enough to look into it.
Is it like a Crestel?
Kind of, It is what I was told. It's kind of like a Crestel. So, but it's just a little bottle of powder that's literally like baby powder or anything of that nature. Yeah. And you can just, when you get to your spot, you just take it out. I keep it right in my bino harness, and you can just shake it up, give it a quick shake to loosen the powder up.
Yep.
Give it a squeeze, and you can instantly see which direction the wind is going.
And they sell that smoke in a bottle. And
that's one.
Another thing I'll do sometimes too is I'll pick up a handful of fluffy snow. Yeah. And you don't want to do this everywhere, because you're not trying to cause a scene, right? But throw some snow up in the air, some light snow, and just kind of watch where that stuff goes.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anything, or you need to do something in a jiff, another thing, if you're going to pull a spot and stock on something, and you're out of sight, and you can pull that off, throw a couple handfuls of snow up and read that wind and figure out how you want to go in.
Yeah.
So
it's almost perfect, because the exact thing I was leading into was what recommendations you had for new predator hunters. So it's almost like you read my mind there. And those are all great points, and so.
Something I forgot to mention is, they make all these seats now. They have all these predator hunting seats. It's actually so I've always tried to tough this out. I don't need that. It's one more piece of gear. Get something to sit on so that you can sit longer.
Yeah.
You pull one stand and you don't have something that's separating you from the ground, and you're soaked for the rest of the day.
You are.
And the way I used to mitigate that is, I'll change out halfway through the day, and you're moving more when you're cold. You're moving more when you're uncomfortable. Get a seat. They have these seats that double as pack.
Yeah. I was actually just going to recommend, through our sponsor, Stealthy Hunter. You can buy on Ryan Lamper's website at stealthyhunter.com the glassing pad. And it's just a foam seat pad that's about that long, that long, about that wide. And Mo and I used one on our last predator calling trip, and it works awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Real lightweight and quiet to sit on. It's a good product for that.
Because it's, again, it's like, you can have even these snow pants that advertise being water resistant and things like that, but when you're sitting in a snowbank for 45 minutes,
and it's that thermal layer too. Like if you're just sitting in your snow pants, even if they are waterproof, even if they don't get wet necessarily, it's still cold on your rear end.
Yeah,
sitting on that little foam seat pad makes a huge difference, monstrous difference in the cold.
I've even had it soak through and get my long johns wet.
Yeah,
it's horrible. I mean, it really
through
is.
Your snow pants.
Through my snow pants, and that's Carhartt bibs.
Yeah,
and so
and Carhartts are great too. Like those, what are they? The standard old brown Carhartts.
Yeah,
those are great. That's a great piece of calling clothing.
Is it?
Yeah, and what you can hang them out in the summer and let them dull out. Just if
sun bleach them.
Yep, sun bleach them, and I recommend that with snow camo too. And that's a hard thing to do when you go out and you spend a bunch of top dollar on good snow camo. But the first thing I'll do is I'll wash it in baking soda, hang it in the sun, and let the sun go to work on it to get rid of that UV.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
Yep, because that's the other thing. Coyotes, it's said they don't see in color, but they see in UV.
Interesting.
So you don't want to put something on trying to conceal Right? And now you're standing out like a sore thumb. So you want to do as much as you can do to mitigate that.
Well, I learned something new today.
Yeah.
and I mean, you can get as technical as you want with your clothing. I got a buddy that's an amazing predator caller, and he will take his clothes off at the truck, put them in a tote, and he does this bear baiting too when he's trying to go after grizz. He's and he will not drive in his clothes. And they stay outside away from exhaust.
He's like a whitetail hunter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any experience in that, but yeah. I mean, and he swears by that. And, like, I think what he say to me one time, he goes, the last thing you want to do is step out of your truck smelling like Marlboro Reds and Old Spice, right? And that's huge, I mean, don't go heavy on the cologne. And I mean, that's all those kind of things to consider. And
they're a lot more particular than people give them credit for, I guess.
Don't hang your snow camel where the red squirrels are going to tear it apart and turn it into nests, right? That's the other thing, because I've been down that road. But
well, it's time to do some squirrel hunting then.
Yeah. What camo do you use if you're okay disclosing that?
So I have a few different types. Sometimes I'll split. I'll do like, summer camo on the bottom, like a summer camo pattern.
Okay.
You guys were talking on an episode, and I kind of liked the way you guys threw it out there, is I'll mix a lot of gear. And if say you've got like about 2 weeks ago, we still had snow up on the trees, but you got some, south facing areas where the ground's bare underneath the trees. Well, wear some regular summer camo on your bottom half. Go snow camo on the top. If that snow comes off those trees, you start noticing we get a good blow or a warm phase, and we lose all that snow off the trees. Wear something different that accommodates that background, right? Gotcha. And just kind of. I keep a big bag of stuff in my truck.
Tailor it to your environment.
And that's the other thing. You could drive 20 miles up the road. You might have a good you go up in altitude and you got a nice fresh snow and it's nice and white and bright. You might want to wear like some goose hunters. They have that plain white, those coveralls and stuff, and that's really good. Sometimes you don't want a pattern, but you also want to be able to slip into something else and match your surroundings. And there's a lot of schools of thought on that. Some guys say it doesn't matter. I think it does.
I think so too.
And I'm the kind of guy, I will take $1,000 rifle and rattle can it white. And with flat white paint, and I'll tape everything off that I don't want paint in, and I will just absolutely destroy that rifle with spray paint. And I know that's really hard for some guys, but
I've done the same thing. Not necessarily with $1,000 rifles, but
get it Cerakoted,
I mean,
they do sell. If you're not the kind of person willing to do that, they do sell wraps that's self-adhesive, so it doesn't actually have stickies. It's stretchable, and as it contracts back around itself, it kind of has a Velcro effect almost.
Done the exact same thing.
Yep, that's I have a couple that are done that way, and you wrap it around. You make sure you at least halfway overlap itself or overlap on itself, and then it'll never go anywhere.
It's like gauze.
Yeah, basically. Another thing people do is medical tape.
And something, and all that stuff is good. I'd pull that off a few times throughout the season and treat your gun, because that stuff holds moisture.
Yes,
it does. Yeah,
and I've learned that the hard way too with wrapping guns. Another thing, like probably everybody here at this table could vouch for this. I see a lot of guys take tape. And they'll wrap that fore end of that stock to that barrel, and they'll start cinching that tape down around there. And that starts changing the performance of that rifle.
It does.
And I see that is like my pet peeve. I see guys do that, and I'm like, oh. And the other thing, you're manipulating that stock. You're putting it through different temps, different humidity levels, and you are basically just, you're memory in that material by doing that. Let that thing free float, tape the stock tape, the buttstock, leave the forend,
right.
Run the tape down the barrel and stop at the forend.
Yeah.
Don't start tinkering with that free float.
No, it's a good way to lose all your accuracy immediately.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point to bring up. That's
Yeah.
And then if you do have that space between that stock and that barrel, that's a great place to get condensation that never finds its way out to. And then it's kind of going to work in concealment.
Just pit rusting.
You go to pull that thing apart in the summer and you're like, oh, you got issues you didn't know you had. So
Right.
Right.
Any gear recommendations for newcomers? Somebody who's just looking at getting into this?
I'd say just run what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Just go have fun.
Yeah.
And whatever.
Yeah. As far as like electric calls, you like the Fox Bros better, or
I love the Fox Bros. Yeah, I do.
I think that's what all of us run.
So I run like some high end calls now, but that Patriot is absolutely awesome. It's a good like entry level call, and I've killed tons of stuff with that Patriot.
Yeah. And I want to say, what is that model? Like $100 or something like that? Like it's super cheap.
I think
it might be more than
up
that
a little bit with our dollar value these days. But
right.
No,
I think I said
there's no inflation.
You guys don't want me getting going on that here.
Yeah.
No, I think I saw that unit going for $179 at Sportsman's. And
160 is it? Yeah.
Another thing too is a recommendation on sounds is I'd order it directly from Fox Pro.
Yep.
And have the sounds input on there that that are gonna be useful for our environment.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of sounds on there that you're just like, what am I going to do with this? Or it's for
use it.
maybe like, back where you're from, that would work great. Or back where I'm from, that'd be great. But and they have a pretty good sound list that kind of adheres to our species types,
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And I want to say, when I ordered my Fox Pro, I want to say it came loaded with like 250 different sounds or something
awesome.
like that. I mean, varying size or varying species. And the cool thing I like about them, and I'm sure other companies do it as well, but is you can overlap your sounds. And so you could have a distress call going off at the same time as, say, ravens in the background.
Yeah.
Or you could even do other coyote yips and things like that to initiate some kind of competitive nature there. So the overlapping is a really neat
Something
feature.
else you can do too is if you don't have the money to invest in like a high dollar unit like that, that's fine, is incorporate hand calls.
Yeah.
And create that,
Take your DeWalt speaker.
Yeah. Just bring your power tools to the to the call stand.
Exactly.
But I mean, you don't need to go out and spend a bunch of money.
I
ran for a long time, on a budget like that, and I was successful.
I have, as far as wolves go, I have had tremendous success just howling with your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I have tricked more wolves than not. I've only ever had a couple that I've seen and I've howled at and they didn't come in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At least out of curiosity.
You were with me on the one that wouldn't come in that we were really bummed at.
Right.
We were out looking for bears together. Mo and I were a couple of years ago, I guess probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And there was a wolf across a river about 1,000 yards away. I had him ranged and he was just lumbering down the riverbed, and he was monstrous wolf. Probably the biggest one I ever seen live in the field. Huge dog. And I lit off and howled at him, and I was all set up prone with my 7 mag, and I thought, this sucker's going to come right in. As soon as he hits 700, I'm going to let him have it, because I wasn't quite confident at 1,000. And there's a bunch of reasons why with what I had for a rifle at that point and what load I was shooting. But anyway, I howled at him. He stopped, looked, and then just kept on going. Never stopped. He just didn't care. Did not matter.
Yeah.
He was the biggest dog in the valley, and maybe I sounded like a girl. I don't know. But this last fall, I called in a couple this last fall. And then I've called in a couple that I've shot, and then Mo and I have called in. When I was with you, when Mo shot his last one, there was a whole pack there. And right after he killed his, we drug it out of the clearing. And I said, man, there's got to be more right in here. I mean, there's got to be more of them.
Oh, yeah.
I started howling, and like the whole pack in under 300 yards away, they were all standing there watching us drag his buddy off.
Yeah.
They were close. And they would respond, and I probably had them responding for over an hour.
Oh, yeah.
Nonstop, back and forth talking. And it got into the later in the morning time, about 10:30, and I thought, man, they're going to stop talking at some point. I got to get one to come out. And then one of them broke away and came in close and responded. I could have swore it was under 100 yards. Like he came in and just did a little probe and was just checking out. Maybe he saw me, maybe he smelled me, I don't know. But nothing ever stepped out. But you can definitely get them to talk back with just mouth howling.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Like we'll be out caribou hunting and kinda,
yeah, for sure.
And you get them, they light up pretty good.
Yeah,
they're pretty vocal.
It's a neat experience. Yeah, and it's really interesting too, having a pack howl back at you like that. You can kind of figure out what they're doing in their particular howl and try to mimic that and just get them riled up.
Yeah.
And, certain pitches or certain lengths, or maybe a bark and then a short howl, and just different things that I've learned to just kind of rile them up and just maybe get them to puff out their chest and, all right, and we're going to come out here and eat this guy.
Yeah.
Because that's what they'll do. You know, if there's a rival wolf in there that doesn't belong, and they know that. They know you're not one of them.
Right.
But they don't know that you're not a wolf. They'll come in to kill you. What they think is a wolf,
right?
They'll be at the wrong end of that stick, but yeah. But anyway,
they can be pretty receptive.
Yeah,
I set up kind of early on. I set up on a spot. I set up on some fox sign and put the call out 15 yards in front of me, and I'm like, I'm gonna call a fox in, and I had a 200-yard zero.
Okay,
and I was running a 223. And I had this wolf come over this bank. I was playing a rabbit call. He came up over this bank, looked at me like, you're not taking this from me, and ran directly to that call. And I shot over his back. I was so jittery. I was, I was so excited. And then I'm like, what? What just happened? And I cranked another one like immediately, and he bobbed and weaved, and he was gone. He did an awesome job getting out of there.
Yeah.
The whole deal was I had that 200-yard zero, and he was like at 20 yards.
Right.
And it just,
man, that's rough.
And that's that kind of thing. Like, you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I've heard some guys tell some crazy stories.
Well, I mean, on that note, it's good if you're going to be using a rifle out hunting, and you have 100 or even a 200-yard zero. After you get it zeroed up, man, bring your target into 20 yards and see what it does. And maybe you'll change from a 200-yard zero to a 100-yard zero, just so in case something comes in, you're still locked on at close distance.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a horror story about that I'm not going to tell right now.
I was alluding to that because I know you went through that.
We're a little late in the episode for that story, but
absolutely,
it's coming. So
we'll hit that again soon and talk about that. But
all right, well we've covered a lot of ground. Do you have anything else you want to talk about real quick, or anything that comes to mind?
Just make sure you're comfortable. Figure out what you're going to go after, and just try to tailor whatever you're going to do to that, and be patient. And it's
a process.
It is.
Yeah, don't give up if you don't see anything on your first trip.
Super fun. Oh, that is definitely something I'll bring up is we had that. When was that heavy snow year? Last year.
Last winter.
So I've never been big on carrying a sidearm. I'll carry like a dispatch weapon, like a 22 or something. So you don't want to shoot something with a 204 at 300 yards, walk up to it, and you got to do a dispatch, and you pump a 30 grain varmint bullet into that thing at 5 feet, right?
Right.
But the other side to that is I'd never experienced this before last year, is moose. Do a good shakedown, because that's the thing. When you're, those moose will hold up on established trails and stuff when the snow's deep.
Right,
but the other side of that is you're walking in a lot of places you normally wouldn't walk, and you usually have snowshoes on. You're not that mobile.
Right.
And I had a lot of run-ins with moose last year.
Yeah.
And it was like the first time that and carry a sidearm and do a good shakedown. Well, the last thing you want to do is have to explain to a trooper, I was out like blowing party toys trying to kill predators, and I shot this moose in self-defense, and he's going to look at you like, okay.
Well, you got charged by a cow earlier this year, didn't you?
Last year I got charged by a cow.
Okay,
gotcha. Yeah, and so I had some bear spray on me. It wasn't far from the house, and I was pulling a set, and I ended up bear spraying it because I didn't want to shoot it. I didn't want to have to go through all that paperwork.
Yeah, for sure.
And that actually worked. I wouldn't advise that.
That's the first time I ever heard of somebody using bear spray on a moose, but I suppose it would work.
I had been having quite a few problems, and I'm like, I don't want to burn up all my tokens in one place. So if I have to spray one of these things, I'm gonna try that first. And it worked.
Right.
It worked.
That's good information.
How close did she get before you let her have it?
10 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she was coming full on.
And
Ears
that's
back,
another,
hackles up.
Stomping.
That's a scary
frantic
thing to be in.
And I've had that happen more than once, Colin. I mean, that is something to consider.
Wow.
Yeah.
And another thing you do too is you'll frequent the same spots over and over again, and you'll establish trails. Well, those moose come up on those trails to take a break.
Yeah.
And you go, hey, I'm going to call my favorite spot. You go walking down there and you get charged. And I mean, that's
interesting.
Something to be cognizant of. I mean, it's
sure.
Not that unlikely when you start digging for those experiences out there.
Well, just a short little thing that I'll add to this. When Mo and I were out, and we have disputed this, but I'm sticking with it. We pulled off on the side of the road, and there was a couple of wolf tracks, and they had taken a leak in the snowbank. It was right on the side of the road. And we're kind of overlooking our little spot there.
Sure it was.
And I looked down in the snow. No, I'm positive it was a wolf. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. I might have added to their pee post. Probably riled them up a little bit. But I looked down in the snow, and there was a bear track in the snow.
Yep.
Yeah. So have you ever come across winter bear?
No. But we've called bears in. So we've gotten up out of stands in high country trying to call early season fox right when they open. And we got up one time and we had a black bear eyeing us. And I mean, that was
in what month now?
That would have been late September. No, that would have been early October.
Okay.
Yeah. In a well-known area too. And we actually passed people walking in. And
really?
We got up to go out, and there was a black bear eyeing us, and I'm like, that thing definitely came into this.
Did you clobber it?
No, not. We were carrying 22 max, so
well,
we just wanted to get it. We started doing the waving thing, and
I've that bear track.
I know.
It looked like a bear track.
I'm
but there was
convinced
one.
It was a bear track. It was wind blown. It was hard pack, and there could have been wind blown snow. And the rest of them, I'm sticking with it.
Could have been a couple wolf paw prints just right.
No.
There were stories of winter bears being out super late this year.
Because
this was a lot more than late though.
Well, no, there was a lady I want to say I think it was it was in mid to late December that ran into a grizzly while she was out skiing.
Winter bears are not unheard of.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm not saying that they're not going to come into a predator call. That wasn't even what I was talking about. It was just incidental, just coming across tracks but while you're out there.
Well,
I have more than a half dozen stories about other guys that I know that have come across bear tracks in December, January, February.
Yeah. So right now, you've kind of got the tail end of the season if you're trying to call coyotes or wolves. And in my opinion, it is warm enough.
Oh yeah.
There
are bears out in the southern half
and
of the state.
I've seen plenty of tracks in March.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like pretty consistently in certain areas and grizz tracks. And so, I mean, I'm aware of that. You got to pay attention to that. I would carry a sidearm.
100%.
And for the lower 48 listeners that may not live in bear country, they don't actually sleep all winter. Their metabolism goes down a lot and their heart rate slows even more. And they go into a very efficient mode of living to where they don't have to eat or anything like that. They can stay in their dens and stay warm, but they're not asleep all the time. They do sleep lethargic. A lot, but they're lethargic, and they will, if the sun's shining and it's a nice warm day, they'll pop their head out of their den and soak up some sunlight while it's warm and then go back in, and if it gets really warm and the snow's not too deep, they'll come wander around and then go back in and sleep for another week or two, or just hibernate. But
especially this time of year and this March time frame, getting into April, I mean it's about that time. I've been considering going to my den area and looking to see if some bears have popped the hole yet. I think it's a bit premature, but the earliest I've seen one in the spotter, I have a spot that I can glass up from a road that's kind of my gauge. Like if I see bears from here out on this mountain from the highway with my spotter, then I know it's time. Like I know it's a good time to go strap on the snowshoes and go camp for a couple of days up in the mountains.
Yeah.
But the earliest I've seen them was like April 7th. But that can vary from bear to bear. They're individuals.
I love spot and stalk bear hunting.
So much fun.
And I've yet to take one. You know, I'd never come across the right one, but I've seen lots of bears.
Yeah. And to that statement as well, I haven't shot one on snowshoes in the spring, but I've had encounters. I won't get into the story right now, but I've had some encounters. I've been glassing from one spot, looking at a den that I thought was a den across the valley, and then I saw tracks 50 yards from me in this avalanche chute, and I walked around the corner on this castle of rocks, and there was a den about 50 yards from me with fresh tracks coming out of it. I mean, probably a day or two prior, and it was right next to me. So that type of hunting is a lot of fun, and I've had the opportunity one time to take one, but it wasn't the right situation and just didn't pan out. But anyway.
Well, when you're predator calling, you're taking your rifle in and out of your vehicle a lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put your rifle in the back of your truck, in the back seat, or maybe you stick it up in the front seat, depending on what your setup is.
Yep.
There's always, I know I've always been really careful about how I set it in. I don't want it to fall over, especially because I'm worried most about the glass.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan Lamper solved that problem for us with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover.
Yeah.
Amen.
We already plugged the glassing pad earlier. It's great for when you're out in the woods, and the peace of mind of having that cover on there.
And if you're snow machining, having it to cover up your rifle, if you have your rifle on your back like I do, that rifle cover keeps the snow off the scope, out of the action.
Yeah.
It has a little crown cover that covers the barrel as well. Not that you shouldn't have your barrel taped, but if you happen to shoot and you haven't retaped your barrel yet, that crown cover, crown cover covers the end of your barrel and keeps the snow and debris out of there.
Out.
Oh yeah,
it's a phenomenal piece
and we
of
have a
equipment.
discount code through the podcast. If you apply the code at checkout, the Northern Hunter, you'll save on anything from Stealthy Hunter. As well as Yukon River knives, which you will need when you're skinning out your predators.
Right. Yeah, and they even have a small game knife.
Yes, the small game knife is real handy. I know I was showing you the Hunter earlier. That's
slick.
It's a great do-it-all hunting knife, and a portion of all their profits goes to support a missionary in Alaska. And we talked about bear baiting as well. Batum 907 makes the best bear baiting attractants and lures in the business.
We
do. Get you some nasty boar and bring those bears in. It's about that time.
Talked about trapping and bait piles for predator hunting, and they also make bait. They also make trapping lures as well.
I know somebody that uses nasty boar for a trapping lure.
I imagine it works very well.
Oh yeah.
I bet it works.
Real potent stuff right there. So and if you're doing any reloading for your predator rifle, check out some Hammer bullets.
Absolutely. I mean, as we found out, they even have 20 caliber. So
I'm sure we'll all be experimenting with those for this next season. So
all right. Well, aside from that, you guys got any final thoughts?
I think that just about wraps it up. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
It was great.
Absolutely. I'm glad you could cut some time out of your day. I'm sorry we went a little bit late tonight, but
it's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for
we'll have to have you on
me.
again. Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll have to have you on and talk about bear baiting once that kicks into swing.
I'd love to come on and talk about that. That's my second
We're
favorite.
all bear baiting fools in here.
Oh yeah.
I've
been at bear bait since I was 7. So
yeah,
I'm envious, man.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my least favorite month of the year because it's right around the corner, and I just,
Well, I love it because it's warm and there's so much hope in the air.
there is hope,
and
but-
there's so much to look forward to, And, yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah.
to
get to prep.
Just waiting to get on my wheeler, man.
Yeah.
But
I just dug mine out. Yeah.
yeah.
I saw that. Yeah.
Well, I got to get it in the shop and go through it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. Well, hopefully you liked the show. Got a lot of good information from it. If you did, go ahead and give us a rating on whatever channel you're listening on, and make sure you're following and sharing it with your friends.
That's right.
If anybody's interested in getting into predator hunting, there's a lot of great opportunity up here and a lot of great information on the show. So get it out to your friends, and you can check out our social medias. We got @The Northern Hunter on Instagram and Facebook. Here soon, we're going to be uploading these podcasts to YouTube, I
Yeah.
believe. So you can check us out there. And is that your handle?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a little something I'm trying to get going.
Gotcha. And if you want to look up,
it's okay.
and if you want to look up our guest here, Chris, you can look him up at Apex-Alaska on Instagram.
Yes, sir.
And
Excellent.
definitely go throw him a like. So,
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of fun, and we're going to get out of here. So
All right.
get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll catch you next week.
Yep.
Have
See
a
you
good
next
one.
time.
Thanks, kids.